Chapter 3856. Outside the heavenly dragon divine palace, there was a mountain range 100,000 miles to the south. Ji Tianxing, dressed in a white robe and empty-handed, was strolling in the air above the mountain range, stepping on the sea of clouds. He was not in a hurry at all and strolled leisurely. He looked like he was taking his time, but he was actually waiting for the imperial tutor and the others to catch up. Previously, when he was waiting for news in the soaring dragon palace, he had been secretly observing the movements in the Dragon Emperor Divine Palace. When the imperial tutor deployed his troops, he had already sensed that something was wrong. When the imperial tutor led a large group of imperial guards to the soaring dragon palace, he left the soaring dragon palace and flew all the way south. When he arrived above the mountain range, he slowed down and strolled leisurely. He wanted to see how much enmity the Ice Dragon King had towards him, and how would the Dragon Emperor, North Sea, deal with this matter. Although he and North Sea had known each other for more than 1,000 years, they could be considered friends. But he was not naive enough to think that North Sea, who had been the Dragon Emperor for more than 1,000 years, would still call him brother. He wanted to see how the imperial tutor and North Sea reacted, to see if the two of them were putting on a show. It would not be too late to decide what to do next. With this thought in mind, Ji Tianxing waited patiently in the sea of clouds. Not long after, a dazzling divine light flew over from the northern sky. There were many figures approaching quickly. Ji Tianxing looked over calmly and saw that there were more than 1,000 people in the divine light. The leader was a skinny old man in a black robe. He was emitting terrifying killing intent and chilling intent. Behind him were 35 immortal kings. Most of them were intermediate and lower immortal kings. Only 3 of them were upper immortal kings. Behind the immortal kings, there were 5 groups of imperial guards. There were more than 1,000 of them, and they were all fully armed with armor and swords. They rushed over with killing intent. After locking onto Ji Tianxing with their divine senses, they sped up. "He's there! He hasn't escaped yet. Catch him! Everyone speed up! We can't let him escape." The God Kings called out as they led the 1,000 imperial guards into the air above the mountains. They formed an encirclement in the sea of clouds. In a short period of time, a huge encirclement was formed, trapping Ji Tianxing inside. Everyone was holding onto their swords and sabers, eyeing Ji Tianxing covetously. They were all ready to jump at any moment. The 30 God Kings spread out and occupied various advantageous positions in the encirclement. They could surround and attack Ji Tianxing at any time. The imperial tutor led the other 5 God Kings through the sea of clouds, approaching Ji Tianxing step by step. "Long Tian, I've long guessed that you were up to no good. Now that your tracks have been exposed and you've fled for fear of punishment, you've been caught by me. Why don't you surrender now?" The imperial tutor stood tens of thousands of feet in front of Ji Tianxing, his black robes fluttering in the wind as he exuded a powerful aura of majesty. The other 5 God Kings also glared angrily at Ji Tianxing, releasing the aura of a God King expert. They appeared especially domineering and domineering. Ji Tianxing was not affected at all. He remained standing in the sky calmly, sizing up the imperial tutor and the others with a faint sneer on his face. As for the 1,000 imperial guards, he didn't even put them in his eyes and completely ignored them. Finally, his gaze landed on the imperial tutor. He asked, "Ice Ghost Dragon King, whether it was in the North Sea Dragon King Palace or now in the Sky Dragon Divine Palace, I have no enmity with you. I came to see Dark North because I had something important to discuss, but you didn't even meet me. Instead, you surrounded me with such fanfare. This prince would like to ask, is this your idea, or was this ordered by Dark North?" The imperial tutor frowned and said coldly without hesitation, "Of course it's my decision. It's my duty to share His Majesty's burden. You traitor, not only did you bring chaos to the Star Source continent, you even came to the Sky Dragon continent to assassinate His Majesty and bring disaster to the Sky Dragon continent. His Majesty is merciful and wants to give you a chance to refute. However, I have to be responsible for His Majesty's safety and will not give you a chance to take advantage of it." Ji Tianxing sneered and shook his head in disdain. He asked, "Do you think that I came back to the Sky Dragon continent to assassinate Dark North and snatch the Dragon Emperor's throne? Is that not the case?" The Imperial Tutor retorted. He shouted angrily, "Don't try to quibble, and don't even think about deceiving everyone." Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and sneered. He asked again, "Since you know that I defeated the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor and snatched the Dragon Emperor's throne of the Star Source continent, why did you ask me? Then who gave you the confidence and courage to attack this prince?" The Imperial Preceptor was taken aback. The 30-odd God Kings and the 1,000 Imperial Guards all revealed looks of fear. Seeing that everyone was hesitating, the Imperial Tutor quickly raised his arms and shouted righteously, "Long Tian, so what if you are powerful? Don't even think about making us submit. We are all loyal and righteous people. For the safety of His Majesty and the safety of the Sky Dragon continent, we would rather die in battle than let you go." The Imperial Tutor's expression and tone revealed his impassioned emotions. He looked as if he was ready to lay down his life for Long Tianlang. The other supreme gods and Imperial Guards were touched. Their blood and lofty sentiments were ignited. They raised their arms and shouted in agreement. "Yes, we are all ready to die. For His Majesty, for the people of the world, we would rather die than submit. Stop talking nonsense with him. Everyone, let's kill him. Everyone has the right to kill a traitor with ulterior motives." Amidst a wave of shouts, the Imperial Preceptor pulled out an ice-blue divine sword and made an attacking gesture with his sword. Instantly, the thousands of Imperial Guards and 30 over supreme gods brandished their swords and sabers. They activated their divine power and used all sorts of skills to surround and attack Ji Tianxing. Suddenly, a dazzling divine light lit up a radius of 30,000 miles. The extremely violent divine power fluctuations caused the divine power in the area to become chaotic. A storm started to blow out of nowhere. Before anyone could use their skills, a terrifying pressure had already gathered in the area and pressed down on Ji Tianxing. As the leader, the Imperial Tutor looked confident on the surface, but he was actually feeling uneasy. He had a feeling that the supreme gods and Imperial Guard around him would very likely become cannon fodder and pay a terrible price. It would not be that easy to capture or kill Long Tianlang. However, something that no one expected happened. Just as the Imperial Guards and Supreme Gods were about to unleash their skills, and the Imperial Tutor was momentarily dazed, Ji Tianxing suddenly vanished. Without any warning, not even a flash of divine light, he just vanished into thin air. Everyone was stunned as a thought flashed through their minds. Could it be that Long Tianlang is not his true body but an illusion? Before anyone could think about it, another frightening scene appeared. Whoosh! Long Tian suddenly appeared behind the Imperial Tutor and casually threw a punch at the Imperial Tutor's back. Chapter 38:57. Boom! A deafening muffled sound exploded. The dark golden fist slammed into the Imperial Tutor's back, causing blood to splatter everywhere. The Imperial Tutor fell forward, blood spurting out of his nose and mouth as he groaned in pain. His back caved in, and at least 6 or 7 dragon bones were shattered. There was a hole in his black robe, and the armor he was wearing also had a hole in it, and a few cracks appeared on it. The surrounding God Kings and Imperial Guards were all dumbfounded. No one would have thought that Long Tian's strength was actually so tyrannical, his speed swift to such an extent. He had already injured the Imperial Tutor before the others could even use their ultimate skills. On top of that, he merely threw out a punch and didn't use any profound techniques. A dignified 9th-stage God King, the Imperial Tutor who was closest to the peak God King, was seriously injured just like that. Was this the strength of a peak Divine King? It was too terrifying. As this thought flashed through his mind, the divine abilities of more than 1,030 people were finally unleashed. Swish! 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 All of a sudden, the sky was flooded with the radiance of swords and sabers, as well as the light of divine spells. However, before the overwhelming attacks of divine spells arrived, Ji Tianxing had already grabbed the heavily wounded imperial tutor and disappeared from the sky. Rumble. Amidst the earth-shattering rumbles, divine spells bombarded the ground, turning thousands of miles of land into ruins. Dust was flying everywhere, and the energy was raging, but Ji Tianxing and the imperial tutor were nowhere to be seen. A while later, when the dust and divine light had dispersed, a god king suddenly discovered Ji Tianxing's tracks. Look, there they are. This high-level divine king was the vice commander of the imperial guards. He was an 8th-layer divine king. Everyone looked in the direction he was pointing and saw two figures above the sea of clouds 30,000 miles away. A black figure was wrapped in golden light and seemed to be unable to move. The other white figure was constantly waving his palm and flicking his finger, sending out rays of sword light that slashed at the black figure's body. Even though they were 30,000 miles away, the god kings could still feel the sharp sword intent of the sword light. In fact, the crowd could even vaguely see the black figure trembling nonstop as blood splattered out one after another. Damn it! He actually captured the imperial tutor. That damned thief! He is torturing the imperial tutor. Everyone, let's attack together. We must save the imperial tutor. Over 30 god kings let out cries of grief, indignation, and humiliation. They hurriedly led nearly 1,000 imperial guards to save the imperial tutor. At the same time, in the northern sky, there was another dazzling divine light that was hurtling over. Within the dazzling divine light, there were also more than 1,000 figures. They were all wearing armor and wielding swords and sabers. The leaders of the imperial guards were over 20 god king experts. Among them, there were 4 high god kings. Clearly, this group of god kings and imperial guards was summoned by the imperial tutor after he discovered that Long Tian had escaped. They flew across the sky at lightning speed. After seeing the situation clearly, they quickly met up with the first group of imperial guards and rushed to save the imperial tutor. After the 2,000 imperial guards and 60 god kings met up, they quickly surrounded Ji Tianxing and the imperial tutor. At this moment, everyone could clearly see that the imperial tutor, who was imprisoned by the golden light, was already covered in wounds and dripping with blood. He looked extremely miserable. Not only had his divine crown fallen off, his hair was disheveled, and his clothes were tattered. His body was also covered with wounds that were so deep that his bones could be seen. However, he was restrained by more than 10 rays of golden light. He could not use his divine power to resist, nor did he have the strength to struggle. What shocked everyone the most was that every time Ji Tianxing stabbed the imperial tutor with his sword light, he would ask in a dignified tone, "Do you admit to your crimes? Do you still not know your crimes? Are you still not repentant?" Clearly, Ji Tianxing was using torture to extort a confession. He was deliberately torturing the imperial tutor to force him to admit to his crimes. The 60 god kings and the 2,000 imperial guards were all dumbfounded. Everyone looked at each other, their eyes filled with confusion. They even began to whisper to each other. What's going on? How despicable! How dare Long Tian humiliate the imperial tutor like this? Long Tian is actually using torture to extort a confession? What crime is he asking the imperial tutor to admit to? What crime did the imperial tutor commit? In their confusion, everyone actually forgot to rescue the imperial tutor. They did not dare to act rashly. At this moment, Ji Tianxing saw that all the god kings and imperial guards had arrived. He said loudly, "Everyone, please be our witnesses today. Let's see if the imperial tutor dares to admit to his crimes. He is arrogant and disregards the authority of the Dark North Dragon Emperor. He is overstepping his authority and using public resources for his own personal gain. He has even taken over the authority of the Dark North Dragon Emperor. Without the approval of the Dark North Dragon Emperor, he can mobilize all the soldiers and do whatever he wants. How can the Heavenly Dragon Divine Palace prosper with such treacherous officials? How can the authority of the Dark North Dragon Emperor be used to govern the world? Tell me, don't you think this sinful official deserves to be executed?" Ji Tianxing's powerful voice reverberated in the sky. It was deafening. The 2,000 Imperial Guards and 60 God Kings were stunned. For a moment, no one said a word. They vaguely felt that something was wrong. It was as if the atmosphere had changed. However, they could not tell what was going on. No one took the lead to refute or save the Imperial tutor. Everyone was silent and did not dare to act rashly. Only some of the braver Imperial Guards began to whisper among themselves. Aren't we here on the orders of the Imperial tutor to kill the criminal who tried to assassinate the Dragon Emperor? Yeah. How did it turn into Long Tian interrogating the Imperial tutor in front of everyone and forcing him to confess? What should we do? Shouldn't we do something? That Long Tian, did he really try to assassinate the Dragon Emperor? Why didn't I hear anything? Seeing that the Imperial Guards and God Kings did not react, the severely injured Imperial tutor was so angry that his lungs almost exploded. Incomparable humiliation and anger made him look hideous. He glared at the crowd with bloodshot eyes and roared, "You bunch of bastards! What are you waiting for? Hurry up and kill Long Tian and save me. He is the criminal who tried to assassinate the Dragon Emperor. He is deliberately humiliating me and framing me." Since the Imperial tutor's authority had been destroyed and he had lost all face, he could not admit to his crimes. He had to deny it. Seeing the Imperial tutor's reaction, Ji Tianxing sneered and said, "Ice Dragon King, do you see that? This is what they mean by those who are unjust are doomed to destruction. You have always been in charge and used to deceiving your superiors and subordinates. These Imperial Guards have long harbored resentment against you. It is only because of your domineering power that they did not dare to speak up. Now that I have exposed your evil nature, who will go against their conscience to save you? Ah, you damn bastard, you are slandering me." The Imperial tutor was so angry that he roared in a hoarse voice. Chapter 38:58. The Imperial tutor had been publicly humiliated and tortured by Ji Tianxing. He had even been accused of disrespecting the Dragon Emperor. He was so angry and humiliated that he almost went berserk. However, the God Kings and Imperial Guards were confused as they watched Ji Tianxing put the Imperial tutor on trial. They did not know what to do. From Ji Tianxing's actions, it did not seem like he was going to assassinate the Dragon Emperor. Instead, it seemed like he was helping the Dragon Emperor get rid of a traitor. Everyone knew how arrogant and domineering the Imperial tutor was. It was just that no one dared to say it out loud. Some of the God Kings and Imperial Guards who had been bullied by the Imperial tutor were secretly delighted to see the Imperial tutor in such a tragic state. Under such a complicated situation, of course, no one would take the lead to save the Imperial tutor. Moreover, everyone knew that Long Tian was a peak God King. Even the Imperial tutor, who was a 9th-tier God King, was like a puppet in Long Tian's hands. Who would dare to attack Long Tian? Wouldn't that be courting death? The atmosphere in the sky was getting more and more awkward. The Imperial tutor's screams were getting louder and louder. At this moment, several beams of divine light shot over from afar and rushed into the field as fast as lightning. "Stop! Long Tian, stop now!" Before the beams of divine light arrived, a majestic male voice could be heard. The 2,000 soldiers of the Imperial Army and 60 God Kings immediately regained their confidence when they heard this voice. Everyone stopped talking and bowed in unison. They shouted, "Greetings, Your Majesty, Dragon Emperor." Obviously, Dragon Emperor North Sea had arrived with his men. Behind Dark North, several God King powerhouses followed closely. It was precisely Long Xiang and the 4 protectors. The 4 guardians were extremely loyal to North Sea. Their status was much higher than that of the Imperial Guards. They were North Sea's most loyal bodyguards. Hearing North Sea's shouts, Ji Tianxing also retracted his right hand and stopped torturing the Imperial tutor. The Imperial tutor, who was on the verge of death, immediately burst into tears when he saw North Sea. He was so excited that he felt like he had just been given a new lease of life. Your Majesty, you're finally here. Quickly kill Long Tian. Quickly kill this bastard." The Imperial tutor was as excited as if he had seen a life-saving straw. His expression was rather comical. However, the atmosphere in the hall was so heavy that no one dared to laugh. Even Ji Tianxing couldn't be bothered to laugh at the imperial tutor anymore. Instead, he frowned and looked at Dark North. We haven't seen each other for more than 1,000 years. And this is how you treat your old friend? Ji Tianxing's voice was very calm, but there was a trace of coldness and dissatisfaction in his tone. Dark North also stared at him. After sizing him up a few times, he sighed. You've changed. Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and said expressionlessly, You have an additional goatee compared to before. Why can't I change? The God Kings and Imperial Guards in the surroundings became rather stunned when they heard the conversation between the two of them. The Imperial tutor, who was shackled by the golden light and covered in wounds and blood, was even more dumbfounded. He could not help but roar. Your Majesty, now is not the time for you to reminisce about the past. Long Tian's ambitions are already clear. Why aren't you giving the order to capture him? Actually, what the Imperial tutor really wanted to say was, Can't you save me first before wasting your breath on Long Tian? Even though he was suppressing his anger, he did not express his true thoughts. However, his expression, tone, and choice of words when he roared at Dark North had gone way overboard. This was definitely not the attitude an Imperial tutor should have toward the Dragon Emperor. It was like an elder reprimanding a junior. Dark North was not the only one who frowned. Even the surrounding God Kings and Imperial Guards felt that the atmosphere was not right. They felt very awkward for the Dragon Emperor. The Imperial tutor probably also felt that he had lost his composure, so he quickly shut his mouth and said no more. Dark North ignored the Imperial tutor and continued to stare at Ji Tianxing. He asked, You don't believe me and are angry? Not only did Ji Tianxing frown, but the surrounding God Kings and Imperial Guards were also stunned. The Dragon Emperor had always referred to himself as Your Majesty. Why did he refer to himself as Your Majesty in front of Long Tian? Did this mean that the Dragon Emperor and Long Tian had some secret relationship? If that was the case, wasn't it ridiculous that the Imperial tutor said that Long Tian wanted to assassinate the Dragon Emperor? At this thought, the God Kings and Imperial Guards all had strange looks in their eyes. They looked at the Dragon Emperor, Ji Tianxing, and the Imperial tutor. No one knew what they were thinking. Ji Tianxing frowned and looked at Dark North. He said, Do you think that I should not be angry? Or do you think that your act with the Ice Turtle Dragon King is flawless? Dark North could only smile bitterly and sigh. He said, I knew that you would think that way. Long Xiang quickly explained, Senior Long Tian, you have really misunderstood His Majesty. This is definitely not an act. This is a misunderstanding. Dark North waved his hand and gestured for Long Xiang to stop talking. He looked at Ji Tianxing and said sincerely, This is not the place to talk. Can you release the Imperial tutor first, and we can talk somewhere else? Seeing Dark North's attitude towards Ji Tianxing, the Imperial tutor was furious. However, he also knew that if he continued to cause trouble, he would have to suffer more pain and humiliation. Now, he could only pray that Long Tian would release him immediately and end this humiliation. Luckily, Ji Tianxing gave Dark North some face. He waved his hand and released the golden light that imprisoned the Imperial tutor. Swish, swish, swish. After a flash of light, the Imperial tutor regained his freedom. He did not bother to treat his injuries and flew away as if he was escaping. He only stopped when he was thousands of miles away. He quickly circulated his energy to treat his injuries and cursed. Long Tian, I will remember today's humiliation. Just you wait. After saying that, he turned around and flew back to the Divine Sword Peak to treat his injuries. Dark North then ordered the 4 Great Guardians and Long Xiang, Everyone, go back to your duties. Do not discuss this matter. The 4 Great Guardians, Long Xiang, the Divine Kings, and more than 2,000 Imperial Guards bowed and said yes. After that, everyone left in an orderly manner and returned to the Heavenly Dragon Divine Palace. Only Dark North and Ji Tianxing were left in the sky. Dark North extended his hand and said, Long Tian, please follow me. After that, he brought Ji Tianxing across the sky and rushed to the Heavenly Dragon Divine Palace. 15 minutes later, The two landed in the heavenly dragon divine palace and entered the Dragon Emperor's personal study. However, Dark North did not take a seat. Instead, he opened a secret door on the inner wall of the study. He brought Ji Tianxing through the secret door and entered a dark secret room. Ji Tianxing looked around and found that the furnishings in the secret room were extremely simple. There were 2 golden prayer lamps on the wall and an old futon on the ground. There was a small altar in front of him with a statue on top of it. The 3-foot-tall statue was very lifelike. It was a white-haired old man with a sage-like demeanor. He gave off an aura of benevolence, wisdom, and love. Ji Tianxing took a look and recognized the statue. It was his master, the heaven-sealing Dragon Emperor. There were 2 small dents on the old futon under the altar. It was obvious that it was caused by kneeling for a long time. Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and asked expressionlessly, "So, you brought me here to show that you have never forgotten your roots and have never forgotten your master's teachings?" Bookhouse Reading Website. Chapter 3859. Of course. Dark North did not hesitate as he replied with certainty. After that, he knelt on the praying mat again and kowtowed 3 times to the statue of the heavenly Dragon Emperor on the altar. Ji Tianxing keenly discovered that there was actually a shallow dent in the incomparably hard black stone slab where he had kowtowed. This was not something that could be formed in 3 to 5 years. After Dark North bowed, he returned to his original position and made an inviting gesture to Ji Tianxing. The 2 of them left the secret room and returned to the study room. They sat down and started to talk. "Long Tian, I apologize to you for what the Imperial Tutor did. Please do not take it to heart." Before they started to talk, Dark North bowed to Ji Tianxing to express his apology. Ji Tianxing accepted it calmly and asked, "If you are not the one who ordered this, why are you apologizing?" Dark North explained with a solemn expression. "After Flying Dragon reported your identity and intentions, I didn't even have time to think of how to face you before Imperial Preceptor led his troops to hunt you down. This matter has nothing to do with me, whether you believe it or not." Ji Tianxing already had an answer in his heart and did not continue to dwell on this matter. He said, "Since it was the Ice Dragon King's decision and he has received the punishment he deserved, I will not make things difficult for him." Dark North heaved a sigh of relief and sat back on the chair. He sighed and said, "I have not seen you for more than 1,000 years. I don't know what kind of opportunity you had to reach the peak from the 4th degree realm, and I have not made any progress in the past 1,000 years. I still have not reached the peak." Ji Tianxing said calmly, "The position of the Dragon Emperor is indeed prestigious and unparalleled, but it is not that easy to sit on. After becoming the Dragon Emperor, you have to deal with endless government affairs. Where will you find the time to cultivate?" "That's true." Dark North nodded in agreement. But after nodding, he realized that Ji Tianxing's words had a hidden meaning. Therefore, he pondered for a while before asking, "So, after you defeated the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor and became the Dragon Emperor of the Starry Origin continent, you are not in a hurry to take control of the situation. Instead, you came to me. Why is that?" Ji Tianxing did not beat around the bush and answered straightforwardly. Controlling the Star Source continent and managing billions of people in the 100 realms is a laborious task. I don't have the leisure and time for that. Professional matters should be left to professionals. I just want to do my own thing well. I'm here to look for you. Firstly, I want to revisit this place and look for memories. Secondly, I want to ask for your help." However, Dark North was already mentally prepared. He guessed that Ji Tianxing's so-called important matter might have nothing to do with the Dragon Emperor's position, much less snatch it from him. However, Ji Tianxing's straightforwardness still surprised him. "You want my help? With your current strength, what else do you need my help with?" Ji Tianxing shook his head and explained, "It has nothing to do with my strength. I just want you to help me find someone." "Say it." Dark North nodded and said sincerely, "As long as it is within my power, I will do my best to help." Ji Tianxing explained, "I want to find a human youth called Wu Hen. He is my son. He was rescued by a peak divine king more than 10 years ago." He briefly described Wu Hen's characteristics and the process of his disappearance. Dark North noted it down. He then nodded and said, I've never seen or heard of this youngster Wu Hen that you're talking about. However, I can use the power of the Heavenly Dragon Divine Palace to search and investigate in the Heavenly Dragon Continent. If you're sure that he was rescued by a peak divine king, I will send a message to the Green Phoenix Old Ancestor of the Shanqing Grotto Heaven. I believe you know that she is the only peak divine king in the entire Heavenly Dragon Continent. Green Phoenix Old Ancestor? Ji Tianxing frowned and thought for a while before saying, although this possibility cannot be ruled out, the probability of her rescuing Wu Hen is not high. Firstly, she is not of the dragon race and does not seem to be good at the dragon race's secret techniques. Secondly, she has always been living in seclusion in the Shanqing Grotto Heaven and does not care much about worldly affairs. Dark North nodded in agreement and said, whether it is or not, I have to send a message to be at ease. All right, thank you. Ji Tianxing clasped his hands and expressed his gratitude. Dark North was not hypocritical. He took out a communication jade slip on the spot and sent a message to the Green Phoenix Old Ancestor in front of Ji Tianxing. Although the Green Phoenix Old Ancestor was high in seniority and powerful, she did not care about worldly affairs and kept a very low profile. But the Shanqing Grotto Heaven was one of the 3 top forces in the Heavenly Dragon Continent. As the Dragon Emperor, Dark North would of course keep in touch with the Shanqing Grotto Heaven. After sending the message, the next step was to wait for the Green Phoenix Old Ancestor's reply. If the Green Phoenix Old Ancestor was cultivating in seclusion, she should not send a message in a short time. Ji Tianxing and Dark North were clear about this, so they would not wait aimlessly and continue to talk about other issues. Although you have inherited the position of the Dragon Emperor, I have no interest in this position, and I should not meddle in other people's business. But this continent is, after all, the painstaking efforts of my master to protect it. This Heavenly Dragon Divine Palace is also the cave where my master has lived all her life, and it was also once my home. Ji Tianxing looked at Dark North and said calmly, I don't want to see an incompetent person who occupies the position of the Dragon Emperor, but can't even protect the foundation of my master. Dark North was judged as an incompetent person. He frowned a little unhappily, but he was not angry because of this. He stared at Ji Tianxing and asked, what do you want to say? Ji Tianxing said expressionlessly, although I have not been back to the Heavenly Dragon Continent for long, and I have not deliberately investigated anything. But I can find a few people to inquire about the current situation of the Heavenly Dragon Continent, as well as your current situation. You can imagine the problem between you and the Heavenly Dragon Continent. To what extent has it reached? It is a little exaggerated to say that everyone knows about it, but the disappointment and criticism of you among the people is an indisputable fact. Dark North's expression was a little gloomy. After a moment of silence, he said in a low voice, you are right. I have not done well. But don't worry, this is only temporary. I will continue to work hard to protect the foundation of the Heavenly Dragon Ancestor. Ji Tianxing shook his head and said in a firm and dignified tone, no, it is not that you are not qualified, and it is not that you are not working hard enough. Ever since you ascended the throne, you have been working hard and conscientiously. This is something that everyone can see, and it is an achievement that cannot be erased. You are not a peak divine king, and you do not have the deterrent power of my master. This is human nature, but it is not the main reason for the situation to deteriorate. The real problem is that you do not know how to judge people, and you do not know how to use them. I think you know in your heart that as long as the Ice Dragon King is in a high position, and he is still bossing you around and often overstepping his boundaries, then you will never be able to govern this continent well. If you do not get rid of him, the Heavenly Dragon Divine Palace will not be peaceful, and the entire continent will not be able to live in peace. Chapter 3860. Long Tian. How could things be as serious as you say? Dark North immediately frowned and waved his hand repeatedly. Don't exaggerate and frighten me with alarmist words. Although the imperial tutor was a petty man and led his troops to hunt you down and made you unhappy, he was still cautious. However, he was also taking precautions. He was worried about my safety, which was why he acted rashly. Tianxing also furrowed his brows and said in a deep voice, I just said that he's already been punished. I won't bother about this matter anymore. I'm talking about how you don't know how to use people. The Ice Dragon King is arrogant and domineering, using public resources for his own personal gain. He has caused the officials to be divided and the people to complain. If you don't get rid of him, your empire will collapse. Dark North was also anxious. He quickly explained, Aren't you just trying to scare me? Back in the days at the North Sea Dragon King Palace, Uncle had always supported me. Whether it was teaching me cultivation since I was young or planning for me later on, he had always poured his heart and soul into me. After I became the Dragon Emperor, he even did his best to share my burdens. I don't know how much criticism and grievances he had suffered, but he never complained. He knew that I was busy dealing with government affairs, so he took up the responsibility and helped me lighten my burden. Tell me, Uncle has treated me so well. How can I kick him to the curb after he has outlived his usefulness? Wouldn't such an ungrateful act be despised by the people and go down in history as a byword? Seeing Dark North's attitude, Tianxing was even more dissatisfied. He asked, Do you really think so, or are you just playing dumb? Dark North was silent for a while. He could only sigh and say, Long Tian, since you know my current situation, you should also know that there are too few people I can entrust with important tasks. I am not a peak divine king, so I don't have the ability to gather followers. Uncle has always been impatient. He hasn't changed even after 20,000 years. Usually, he gives people the impression that he is arrogant and domineering. Not to mention how much effort he has put in to share my burdens. I can't do anything to harm him. Even if I'm willing to bear the infamy and get rid of him, who can I rely on? Seeing that Dark North was still being stubborn, Tianxing did not say anything more. He sneered and said, Expanding the territory does indeed require the support of powerhouses, but governing the world is not necessarily the same. Since you insist that there is no problem with the imperial tutor and still insist on doing things your own way, then let me be the bad guy. Hearing the last sentence, Dark North jumped to his feet and shouted anxiously, Long Tian, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to assassinate the imperial tutor? Tianxing shook his head and said with an indifferent expression, This king is a peak divine king, the master of the Star Source continent. Why would I assassinate a nobody? Then what exactly do you want to do? Dark North heaved a sigh of relief, but he was still puzzled. Tianxing got up and left. When he reached the door of the study, he said, Since you don't want to believe the truth, then I can only think of a way to force you to believe it. Dark North was stunned. He vaguely guessed something, but he could only sigh helplessly. Tianxing left gracefully and disappeared at the end of the corridor outside the study. At the same time, in the Imperial Tutor's palace on the Divine Sword Peak, in a dark secret room, the Imperial Tutor had just consumed a few king-grade divine pills to suppress his injuries and heal his external wounds. Hence, he got up and left the secret room. Accompanied by two of his trusted guards, he went to the main hall to discuss matters. Outside the main hall, there were dozens of elite guards on guard. It was heavily guarded. In the brightly lit main hall, there were already 18 divine king experts waiting respectfully. When they saw the Imperial Tutor walk in, they all bowed and greeted him. The Imperial Tutor suppressed his anger and walked to the main seat with a gloomy face. He looked around and saw that his loyal subordinates were all in the hall. He said straightforwardly, Send a message immediately and gather the 24 divine generals guarding the various regions. Ask them to lead the elites back. Long Tian, that damned thief, bastard. Even if tens of thousands of elites and the power of the entire Taishan Grotto heaven, I will tear him into pieces and burn his bones to ashes. If I can't step on him under my feet, I won't be able to get rid of the hatred in my heart. The Imperial Tutor's tone was cold as he gritted his teeth and cursed. The 18 high-ranking God Kings all acknowledged the order in unison. However, there were soon people who raised their doubts and concerns. Lord Imperial Tutor, Long Tian, and His Majesty the Dragon Emperor are old friends. They seem to be on good terms. Isn't it a little inappropriate for us to gather such a large number of troops? If we anger His Majesty and he wants to protect Long Tian, what should we do? A middle-aged divine king in black armor asked worriedly. The imperial tutor shouted with a ferocious expression, "You are afraid of angering His Majesty. But aren't you afraid of angering me? You just need to carry out your orders. I will take care of everything." "I understand." The middle-aged divine king cupped his fists and bowed, then quickly returned to the group. Another white-haired old man stepped out and cupped his fists. "Lord Imperial Tutor, Long Tian is a peak divine king after all. If we fight him head-on, we don't have much of a chance of winning. Even if we can defeat him, if he insists on escaping, I'm afraid we won't be able to trap him." The Imperial Tutor frowned and sneered with a ferocious expression. "Are you all stupid? I've already failed once. Why would I make the same mistake again? This time, the 24 divine generals are bringing back reinforcements. We must secretly return to the Taishian Grotto Heaven. I've already thought of a plan. First, I'll frame Long Tian. Then, I'll think of a way to surround and kill him. As for the specific plan in action, I still need everyone to brainstorm and fill in the details for me. As long as we plan well, no matter how strong Long Tian is, he won't be able to escape." Hearing the Imperial Preceptor's words, the 18 God Kings felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted off their shoulders. They all revealed knowing smiles. Next, the Imperial Tutor revealed a sinister smile and told everyone about his scheme and plan. After the 18 divine kings heard it, they all nodded in agreement. Many of them even took the opportunity to flatter him and express their admiration. However, the Imperial Tutor not only needed to listen to flattery, he also needed to listen to everyone's suggestions. Soon, everyone expressed their opinions and perfected and improved the Imperial Tutor's plan. After nearly an hour of discussion, the Imperial Tutor's plan was improved to perfection. Every step was closely linked and filled with murderous intent. After discussing the action plan, everyone bowed and bade farewell. They left the meeting hall one after another to carry out their mission. The Imperial Tutor also left the hall in satisfaction and returned to the secret chamber to continue healing his injuries. Not long after, the meeting hall regained its silence. At this moment, a transparent figure flew out from the corner of the hall and left silently. This figure flew across the night sky and landed in the soaring dragon palace without alerting anyone. When he returned to the secret chamber and showed himself, he was holding a fist-sized crystal ball in his hand. This mysterious crystal ball was a mid-king level divine item. It had a special effect and was called the Shadow Retaining Ball. Everything that had happened in the conference hall of the Divine Sword Peak had been recorded by the Shadow Retaining Ball. "Ha! Do you think trash like you can fight with me?" The white-robed youth kept the Shadow Retaining Ball and sneered disdainfully. Chapter 3861. Without a doubt, the white-robed young man was Ji Tianxing. Previously, he had tortured the Imperial Tutor in front of everyone and humiliated him. The Imperial Tutor was so humiliated that he went crazy. Furthermore, he had said ruthless words in front of everyone and was bound to take revenge. Ji Tianxing did not care about it, but after a heart-to-heart talk with Dark North, he changed his mind. Dark North was very stubborn. He was determined not to get rid of the Imperial Tutor, not even to remove him from his position. The Imperial Tutor's authority was too great, and he had a vengeful personality. Of course, Ji Tianxing had to be on guard against him. Therefore, after leaving Dark North's study, he quietly rushed to the Divine Sword Peak and hid in the dark to spy on the Imperial Tutor. Reality proved that he had guessed correctly. The Imperial Tutor had indeed gathered his loyal subordinates to discuss his conspiracy and plan in the main hall. Ji Tianxing concealed his tracks and aura. He hid in a corner of the main hall and used a shadow sphere to record everything that happened in the main hall. Since he already knew about the Imperial Tutor's conspiracy, he naturally would not fall for it. At the same time, he would not sit still and wait for death. "Tell Long Xiang to come see me. I have something important to discuss." Ji Tianxing summoned the guard at the door of the secret chamber and instructed him. The guard bowed and accepted the order, then quickly turned and left. Not long after, Long Xiang hurriedly rushed over. After he entered the secret chamber and bowed, Ji Tianxing asked straightforwardly, "Has the Imperial Tutor been suppressing you? trying to expel you from the heavenly dragon divine palace and transfer you to a peripheral region. Long Xiang was stunned. He frowned and did not answer. Ji Tianxing continued. You should know that the imperial tutor's arbitrary and tyrannical behavior will only weaken the prestige of the heavenly dragon divine palace. In the long run, the situation in the heavenly dragon continent will become more and more chaotic, and it will eventually lead to a disaster. Long Xiang was also well aware of this, but he was unwilling to discuss it with Ji Tianxing. Now that the other party was an old friend of the Dragon Emperor, he had no ill intentions towards the heavenly dragon divine palace. Long Xiang gradually let down his guard and didn't reject the topic. He asked, Senior Long Tian, what do you want to say? Ji Tianxing stared at him and said solemnly, You are very loyal to the Dragon Emperor, and you can't resist the oppression of the imperial tutor. But this prince believes that you are not a fool. You must have already collected evidence of the imperial tutor's crimes. Not only you, but the other generals and commanders are also dissatisfied with the imperial tutor, right? Long Xiang furrowed his brows and pondered for a moment before saying with a bitter smile, Senior Long Tian, you are right. I, along with the other generals and commanders, have long been dissatisfied with the imperial tutor's actions. We have also collected evidence and even advised His Majesty. However, all of this was useless. His Majesty's attitude was very firm. He would never be ungrateful and get rid of the imperial tutor. On the contrary, after our advice was heard by the imperial tutor, our situation became even worse. He paused for a moment before continuing. I can understand Senior's feelings. I also know that you want to get rid of the imperial tutor and get rid of this scourge. However, I have to advise you that this is futile. You should give up. You don't have to worry about this. Ji Tianxing waved his hand and said, This time, you don't have to do anything. This prince will handle this matter. You only need to give me the evidence of your crimes, as well as the evidence of the other generals and commanders. Long Xiang's eyes lit up. He was a little tempted. He thought to himself, Our words carry little weight and are not enough to persuade His Majesty. Senior Long Tian's identity is special. Perhaps he can change His Majesty's mind. Thinking of this, he nodded and agreed. Senior, please wait for a moment. I will go and contact everyone to collect the evidence. Ji Tianxing instructed, You must be fast. You must complete it within 2 days at the latest. Time is so tight. Long Xiang frowned and revealed a difficult expression. It's fine on my side. I have a lot of evidence and can hand it over to you soon. However, the other generals and commanders are either out on missions or have been transferred to remote areas. Ji Tianxing instructed, Send messages through jade slips for those who are far away. You just need to collect as much evidence as possible. Okay, I will do my best. Long Xiang nodded with pressure. Before leaving, he couldn't help but ask, May I know why Senior is in such a hurry? Why is time so tight? Ji Tianxing naturally wouldn't tell him that the imperial tutor had already begun to mobilize his troops and would launch an attack in 2 or 3 days. For this kind of matter, the sooner the better. This is to prevent the imperial tutor from being on guard. Long Xiang accepted this explanation and didn't ask any more questions. He hurriedly went to carry out his mission. Ji Tianxing remained in the secret chamber to cultivate. He released his invisible divine sense to secretly envelop the heavenly dragon divine palace and monitor everyone's movements. Time passed silently. Long Xiang was very efficient. In just 1 day, he sent 4 pieces of evidence to Ji Tianxing. One of them was the evidence he had collected over the years. The other 3 pieces of evidence came from 2 generals and a commander of the imperial army. Those 2 southern conquering generals had the same status as him. They were once young and powerful, invincible generals who could command troops like gods. However, their style of doing things was more straightforward and fiery. They had offended the imperial tutor even more. Now that they had been trapped in the heavenly dragon divine palace for more than 200 years, they had been suppressing their anger for a long time. These 4 pieces of evidence came from the grand mystery Cave Heaven, so it was very fast. Ji Tianxing flipped through the 4 pieces of evidence. Each piece of evidence was clear and conclusive. He kept them in his spatial ring. Next, the generals and commanders that Long Xiang contacted were all not in the Grand Mystery Cave Heaven. They were either out on missions or sent to remote areas. They were already far away from the center of power. Long Xiang suddenly sent a message to them. Not only did he have to explain the cause and effect, he also had to persuade them to send back the evidence as soon as possible. This was indeed very difficult. After all, those generals and commanders also needed to carefully consider before they could make a decision. After they made a decision, they also needed time to organize the evidence of the imperial tutor's crimes. Therefore, it was not realistic to expect a result in one day. Long Xiang was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. He paced back and forth in the study. Every once in a while, he would send a message to the generals and commanders, urging them to speed up. Ji Tianxing was calm. He sat in the secret chamber and silently monitored the movements in the heavenly dragon divine palace. He could clearly see that the God King experts under the imperial tutor were also busy sending and receiving jade slips. From the reactions of the God Kings, their conspiracy and plan were progressing smoothly. Ji Tianxing calculated the time. The 24 god generals that the imperial tutor had gathered should have arrived at the Grand Mystery Cave Heaven through the various teleportation arrays in the continent. From the looks of it, the imperial tutor would take action in at most one day. At the same time, some of the imperial tutor's god kings and divine lord guards had also sneaked into the soaring dragon palace to prepare to frame the imperial tutor. Chapter 3862. 2 days had passed, and the third day had arrived. It was the darkest hour of the day. Long Xiang was still urging the generals and commanders, but they seemed to have not made a decision, or perhaps they had not sorted out the evidence. At this time, Ji Tianxing found him. The time has passed. There's no need to rush them. The evidence in their hands is not important. After meeting, Ji Tianxing went straight to the point. Long Xiang, who was full of anxiety and nervousness, was stunned. He subconsciously asked, "Senior, we only have 4 pieces of evidence. Can't you wait for one more day? One more day, and they will definitely make a decision and send the evidence in their hands over." Ji Tianxing waved his hand and said, "There's no need for that. If Dark North has the determination and courage to make a decision, the 4 pieces of evidence in our hands will be enough for Dark North to execute the imperial tutor. If Dark North still wants to protect him and is not willing to cut off his losses, even if we gather another 40 pieces of evidence, it won't be enough." Long Xiang was stunned again. He stared blankly at Ji Tianxing, not knowing what to say. After a moment of silence, he asked, "Senior, what should I do next?" Ji Tianxing patted him on the shoulder and said, "Stay in the secret room and cultivate. Don't do anything else, and wait patiently for one day. Also, don't let anyone know that I have left. Make everyone believe that I am still recuperating in the secret room." Long Xiang immediately understood that Long Tian was about to make a move. He was a little excited and hurriedly asked, "Senior, are you sure you can do it?" Seeing that he was so nervous, excited, and worried, Ji Tianxing smiled and said, "What we need to do is to let Dark North see the truth and bear the pain of getting rid of the imperial tutor. Only through this can he wake up, and it will be very beneficial for him to manage the heavenly dragon continent in the future. If he still refuses to wake up, it will be easy for me to clean up the mess for him." Long Xiang frowned and asked, "But senior, other than the imperial tutor, there are many people under the Dragon Emperor's command. They are all evil, deceiving their superiors and incompetent people." Ji Tianxing smiled and said, "As long as the imperial tutor is eliminated, the other tumors are no longer a concern. Dark North will gradually find a way to eliminate them." "I understand." Long Xiang nodded and bowed respectfully. "Although Senior is powerful, I hope that Senior will pay attention to your safety. After all, the thieves were treacherous, and they had all kinds of vicious schemes that were impossible to guard against. If this matter succeeds, I and countless righteous people will forever remember Senior's kindness. The millions and millions of people of the Heavenly Dragon Continent should also remember your great kindness." Ji Tianxing waved his hand disapprovingly and said, "Don't speak so righteously. This prince is not that noble. I just don't want to see Master's life's work and foundation destroyed in the hands of incompetent people. I also don't want to see my former home and residence occupied by a disgusting reptile. Long Xiang was stunned again and was full of doubts. Ji Tianxing did not explain any further. He turned and left, and his figure gradually became transparent. It was not until he disappeared into the darkness that Long Xiang came to his senses and suddenly understood. So, Senior Long Tian lived on the Divine Sword Peak when he was in the Heavenly Dragon Divine Palace? I vaguely remember that the Divine Palace on the peak was called the Divine Sword Palace. Later, the Imperial Tutor changed it to the Imperial Tutor Palace. After understanding this point, Long Xiang suddenly felt that this excessively powerful and excessively young Senior Long Tian was actually a sentimental person. After lamenting for a while, he gathered 2 deputy generals and a few guards and solemnly said to them, "Senior Long Tian has been recuperating in the secret chamber. You must guard the secret chamber well and not let anyone disturb him. Also, I will be in seclusion to heal my injuries. Other than the Dragon Emperor and Senior Long Tian, no one is to disturb me." The 2 deputy generals and a few loyal guards immediately bowed and accepted the order. After making all the arrangements, Long Xiang returned to the secret chamber to rest. At the same time, without anyone's knowledge, Ji Tianxing entered the Dragon Emperor Divine Palace in an invisible state. The lights were still on in the Dragon Emperor Baiming's study room. Baiming, who was wearing a golden robe and a divine crown, was still focused on reading the memorials and handling the official affairs of the various regions. As a 9th-degree Realm Divine King, the greatest benefit was that he did not need to eat, sleep, or rest. He could work without sleep for a few hundred years. The study room was very quiet. Only the sound of Baiming's breathing and the rustling of the imperial brush on the memorials could be heard. At this moment, Ji Tianxing's figure quietly appeared in the study room and stood in front of Baiming. He was not in a hurry to speak. He still concealed his divine power and sat on the chair in front of the study table. The imperial brush in Baiming's hand stopped abruptly. He slowly raised his head and looked at Ji Tianxing with a frown. "Why are you back again? Why did you come to look for me in the middle of the night?" Baiming's voice was very soft, and his tone was rather calm. There was no anger in it, only a little puzzled. Ji Tianxing waved his hand and shot out a few rays of divine light to set up a soundproof array to strengthen the defense of the study room. Then he laughed softly and said, "Why? I want to stay in the Heavenly Dragon Divine Palace for a few more days to see the scenery of my old home. Can't I? Old Ancestor Qing, Luan hasn't replied, and you're in such a hurry to chase me away?" Baiming stopped what he was doing and looked at him seriously. Maybe old Ancestor Qing Luan is in seclusion and won't be able to reply in a short period of time. Once she has any news, I will definitely send a message to inform you. You're being so mysterious and sneaky. What are you trying to do? Ji Tianxing shrugged and said indifferently, "Nothing. I just want to invite you to watch a show." "What show?" Baiming frowned. After a moment, he guessed something and asked, "Are you referring to the Imperial Tutor?" Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and asked, "What did he do in the past 2 days? You can't be unaware, right?" Baiming nodded and said, "Although I didn't monitor his actions, I don't need to see to know that he will definitely try to take revenge on you. After all, you humiliated him until he was black and blue. With his personality, how can he swallow his anger? And you don't plan to stop him?" Ji Tianxing revealed a playful smile. Baiming smiled. "With your strength, I should be worried about the Imperial Tutor. Moreover, I thought you had already sensed it and should have left the Heavenly Dragon Divine Palace in advance." Ji Tianxing could only spread his hands and sneered, "If that's the case, then you can treat me as if I don't exist and continue with your work. One day later, I'll have a good talk with you. Do as you wish." Baiming frowned and continued to write and read the memorials. Book Guesthouse Reading Website. Chapter 3863. Ji Tianxing and Dark North were both powerful individuals with high statuses. Many things did not need to be said. Both of them knew what was going on. For the next day, the 2 of them did not talk at all. They pretended that the other did not exist. Dark North was busy dealing with government affairs and did not even look at Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing also remained silent. He sat on a chair by the window and closed his eyes to rest. He hid his aura. Even if someone used their divine senses to check outside the study, they would not be able to sense his presence. When the messenger guard and the commander of the Imperial Army entered the study to report to Dark North, he entered stealth mode and completely disappeared. Just like that, no one except Dark North discovered him for the entire day. Finally, a day passed. Night fell again. In the soaring dragon palace, two carefully disguised guards secretly met in a secluded alley. The two of them did not show any expression, but secretly communicated with each other through voice transmission. The Imperial tutor is ready. How is the situation here? Long Tian has been in the secret room. He has not come out or left. What about Long Xiang? Long Xiang is also recuperating in the secret room. No one is allowed to disturb him. What about the items? Have they been placed? Of course, they have been completed long ago. All right, then you wait here. I will inform the Imperial tutor now. After a short conversation, the two of them quickly separated and disappeared into the courtyard of the palace. About 15 minutes later, in the study of the Dragon Emperor, Dark North. Dark North was still busy dealing with government affairs. Ji Tianxing was still sitting by the window, pretending to be invisible. Suddenly, hurried footsteps came from outside the study. The Imperial tutor's angry voice was also heard. Your Majesty, something has happened. As the Imperial tutor's voice sounded, the door of the study was pushed open rudely. The Imperial tutor, dressed in a black robe and emitting a cold aura, strode into the study. Another 4 god kings followed behind him, but they stopped at the entrance of the study, guarding the 2 sides of the door. Dark North put down the imperial brush in his hand and secretly glanced at Ji Tianxing, who was by the window. He thought to himself, is this the start of your so-called show? Of course, Ji Tianxing had already concealed himself and concealed his aura. He had completely disappeared. Dark North frowned imperceptibly. Only then did he raise his head to look at the Imperial tutor and ask with a frown, Imperial tutor, why are you in such a panic? The Imperial tutor didn't notice anything strange, nor did he expect there to be a third person in the study. He said angrily, Your Majesty, I've been in seclusion to heal my injuries for the past 2 days. Although this old man is worried that Long Tian, that dog with ulterior motives, will take advantage of this opportunity to wreak havoc in the heavenly dragon divine palace. However, this old man was busy treating my injuries and was unable to personally patrol and strengthen the defenses. And just a moment ago, the 2 commanders guarding the treasury urgently reported that the treasury had been stolen. Not only were resources worth tens of billions of divine stones stolen, even our supreme profound array disk was stolen. Hearing this sudden news, Dark North was also startled for a moment. His eyes flashed with intense anger. However, he immediately reacted and guessed something. The anger in his eyes quickly disappeared. He pretended to be shocked and revealed an expression of disbelief. He asked loudly, Forget about those cultivation resources. How could the Supreme Profound Array Disk be lost? That's the core of the Supreme Profound Cave Heaven's Divine Array, the key that controls all the great arrays. Quickly tell me, when was the treasury stolen? Dark North's reaction was reasonable and was within the Imperial tutor's expectations. The Imperial tutor quickly replied, This old man was also very shocked when I heard this news. I quickly asked the 2 commanders. They said that it was stolen a few hours ago. However, the treasury's defensive array, door, and passage were all intact, and there were no traces of damage. Even the treasury's interior didn't leave any clues. From this, it can be seen that the thief's strength is very high, and his goal is very clear. To be able to quietly sneak into the treasury without destroying the King Grey Divine Array, quickly steal the resources and Supreme Profound Array disk without leaving any clues. Even this old man can't do it. The Imperial tutor's meaning was very clear. Dark North guessed the Imperial tutor's next move and looked guiltily at the windowsill. Although the chair under the windowsill was empty. Dark North knew that Long Tian must be sitting there, looking at him with a cold smile. Imperial Tutor, don't make blind guesses now. Investigate the truth first. Dark North pretended to be calm and said in a dignified tone. Seeing that everything was as expected, the Imperial Tutor sneered in his heart and said angrily, "Your Majesty, don't worry." As soon as this old man received the news, he sent all the commanders and generals of the Imperial Army to investigate everywhere in the palace and look for clues. The supreme profound cave heaven has been closed by this old man long ago. That evil thief must still be in the palace. The Imperial Tutor was almost roaring at Dark North. The evil thief who stole the resources and treasures was that bastard Long Tian. However, Dark North maintained his natural performance and had an attitude of, "I know, but I won't say it out loud." "Okay, send the order to lock down the entire palace and search with full force." The Imperial Tutor was stunned for a moment and waved his hand. "Your Majesty, there is no need to lock down the palace. This old man has already sent all the men to investigate. I believe there will be results soon. Please wait patiently for a moment." When he said this, the Imperial Tutor's tone was very confident. Dark North nodded and waited in the armchair. However, he was complaining in his heart. Imperial Tutor, even if you want to frame me, please act more seriously. So perfunctory, so straightforward." At the same time, the soaring dragon palace, which was originally peaceful, was suddenly invaded by a large group of Imperial guards led by 4 King of God Realm commanders. A total of more than 300 Imperial guards quickly surrounded the soaring dragon palace and controlled all the exits and passages. The guards and soldiers who were awakened were immediately restrained by the Imperial guards and could not move. 2 Imperial guards and dozens of Imperial guards went straight to the guest room where Ji Tianxing was staying and searched inside for a while. Then, the 2 Imperial guards found a white jade treasure box from a secret compartment in the wall. "Found it. Is indeed here." The 2 commanders of the Imperial Army shouted excitedly. They hurriedly took the white jade box and left Soaring Dragon Palace. Not long after, the 2 Imperial guards brought the white jade treasure box to the Dragon Emperor's study. "Your Majesty, the great mystery array disc has been found. I am here to report." 2 marshals of the Imperial Army bowed outside the study and loudly reported their arrival. Without waiting for Dark North to speak, the Imperial Tutor hurriedly let the 2 Imperial guards into the study and presented the white jade treasure box to Dark North. The square white jade treasure box was placed on the desk. Dark North cast a spell to open it, and the treasure box lit up with golden light. An ancient bronze array disc the size of a palm was lying quietly in the treasure box. This was the core and key of the Grand Mystery Cave Heaven, the Great Mystery Array Disc. Chapter 3864. Dark North felt a little embarrassed. After all, the Imperial Tutor's acting was a little clumsy, and Long Tian remained invisible, sitting on the windowsill and watching coldly. Dark North felt his cheeks burning, guessing that his face must be red. But he couldn't expose it for the time being, so he could only pretend and say with a face full of joy, "It's fortunate that the Supreme Mystery Array plate can be found." The Imperial Tutor frowned and said in a low voice, "But Your Majesty, the resources worth tens of billions have not been found yet." Dark North waved his hand and said disapprovingly, "It's just some cultivation resources. It's no big deal. If you lose it, then lose it." When the Imperial Tutor saw that he was pretending to be confused and was clearly protecting Long Tian, he immediately became angry. "Your Majesty, this matter must be investigated to the end. Those cultivation resources and Supreme Mystery Array plate, do you know where they were found?" Dark North revealed an "I don't want to know" expression, picked up the Imperial brush, and prepared to continue working. The Imperial Tutor pointed at the 2 Imperial guards and shouted angrily, "You two, tell His Majesty the Dragon Emperor how and where you found the Supreme Mystery Array plate." The 2 Imperial guards pretended to be terrified, looked at Dark North with a troubled expression, and then looked at the Imperial Tutor, looking like they wanted to say something but hesitated. Dark North was expressionless, thinking in his heart, These two guys act more realistically than you. Imperial tutor. The imperial tutor shouted angrily again. Speak quickly. As long as you report truthfully, what's there to be afraid of? The two imperial guards gritted their teeth and made up their minds, reporting the situation one by one. Reporting to His Majesty the Dragon Emperor, 12 of U.S. led 2,400 imperial guards and searched for 4 hours. This was found in a guest room in General Long Xiang's mansion. We asked the guards of Long Xiang Palace. Long Tian is staying in that guest room. We found this supreme mystery array plate from a secret compartment in the wall. There was also a small spatial array set up in that compartment in order to hide it from others. After the two of them finished speaking, the imperial tutor's face was filled with hatred. He said to Dark North, Your Majesty, the truth has been revealed. This was Long Tian's doing. This old man has long said that Long Tian has ulterior motives. He wants to get rid of you and take back the heavenly dragon divine palace. You didn't believe it before, but now that the evidence is conclusive, are you still going to turn a blind eye? Seeing how overbearing the imperial tutor was, Dark North could no longer feign ignorance. He could only put down his brush and dismiss the two imperial army marshals. When there was only him and the imperial tutor left in the study, not counting the invisible Ji Tianxing, he said earnestly, Imperial tutor, what are you trying to do by making such a big fuss? Did he have to be so ruthless? Have you ever thought about how you're going to end things if things really escalate to this point? Dark North's attitude clearly showed that he had seen through the imperial tutor's scheme, and he didn't want the imperial tutor to continue making trouble. However, the imperial tutor was even angrier. He roared with an ashen face. This old man is making such a big fuss. Making such a big fuss? Your Majesty, that day in front of so many people, how did that bastard torture and humiliate this old man? If I don't kill him here, how can this old man swallow this anger? Dark North shook his head and said expressionlessly, Let's not talk about right or wrong. Just based on strength, you can't kill him. Even many marshals, generals, and imperial army marshals will be buried with your reckless decision. Imperial tutor, you know that there aren't many talents under this emperor's command. Stop. At this point, it was almost as if he had laid all his cards on the table. However, the imperial tutor was used to being arrogant and despotic. How could he swallow his anger and give up? With a dark face, he sneered, Your Majesty, it's because you've always been so lenient, always wanting to settle things peacefully, that so many people are dissatisfied. If you insist on doing this, you'll only alienate your subjects and make the situation worse. Those marshals, generals, and imperial army marshals, what's the point of their existence? Isn't it to protect the heavenly dragon divine palace, to protect your Majesty's foundation and dignity? Even if they sacrifice themselves, it's worth it if they can help your Majesty get rid of a strong enemy and eliminate danger. After roaring in a low voice, the imperial tutor forced himself to calm down. He bowed to Dark North and said, Your Majesty, please continue with your work. This old man won't disturb you any longer. Don't worry, this old man has already prepared everything. There will be a result within a day at most. In order to help you get rid of all obstacles, in order to help you govern this continent, this old man is willing to give up everything, even if I have to bear all the misunderstandings and curses. At this moment, the imperial tutor's body was ramrod straight. His tone had also become impassioned, full of lofty sentiments with no complaints or regrets. After saying this, he turned and stepped out of the study. As for Dark North, he stared at the imperial tutor's back in a daze for a moment. He thought to himself, could it be that I was overthinking previously and misunderstood the imperial tutor? At the same time, the imperial tutor led 6 god king experts and rushed towards the soaring dragon palace with a murderous aura. At the same time, more than 2,000 imperial army marshals and more than 40 god king experts quickly gathered at the soaring dragon palace. Previously, the imperial tutor and the god kings under his command had discussed and planned many details. But now, many of the plans and details could be discarded. Since the Dragon Emperor and Dark North had already seen through it and made things clear, the imperial tutor had no more scruples. He only wanted to do his best to kill Long Tian as soon as possible and end this matter. 50 God King experts and 2,500 Imperial Army marshals were only the forces besieging the Soaring Dragon Palace. Once Long Tian escaped from the Soaring Dragon Palace and escaped within the Grand Mystery Cave Heaven, the second group of people he had arranged would complete the encirclement. The 24 God generals had already led more than 10,000 elite soldiers and were hiding in various parts of the Grand Mystery Cave Heaven, waiting for orders. Soon, the Imperial Tutor, the God Kings, and the Imperial Army Marshals left the Dragon Emperor Divine Palace and rushed towards the Soaring Dragon Palace. At this moment, in Darknorth's study, swoosh, the invisible Ji Tianxing reappeared on the chair under the windowsill. He looked at Darknorth with a faint sneer on his face. If I did not come to sit here in advance, would you believe the Imperial Tutor's words? The Imperial Tutor claimed that a few hours ago, Long Tian had sneaked in the treasury and stolen tens of billions of resources and the Grand Mystery Array Disk. But in reality, Ji Tianxing had been sitting in the study since a day ago. Therefore, when the Imperial Tutor acted in front of Darknorth, Darknorth felt so awkward and funny. Of course not, Darknorth said calmly. You will not harm me. Even if you want to snatch the throne of the Dragon Emperor, you will not steal the array disk. The Imperial Tutor's method this time is too perfunctory. Ji Tianxing sneered. So what if it's perfunctory? He just wants to find an excuse to attack me. After saying that, he took out 4 jade slips from his interspatial ring and threw them in front of Darknorth. I think you should take a look at what the Imperial Tutor has been doing behind your back all these years. Darknorth picked up the 4 jade slips and glanced at them casually. He asked, evidence of the Imperial Tutor's crimes? Where did you find them in such a short time? Or did someone else provide them to you? End of chapter. Chapter 3865. It doesn't matter where the evidence came from. You only need to see if the evidence is real or fake, and if there are any mistakes. Ji Tianxing looked at Darknorth with an indifferent expression, his eyes growing colder and colder. He was becoming more and more impatient with Darknorth's stubbornness. Darknorth didn't answer. He quickly browsed through the evidence in the 4 jade slips with his divine sense. Although he didn't show it on the surface, his expression didn't change at all. But in reality, his eyes were constantly flashing with shock and anger. Obviously, the evidence in the 4 jade slips was shocking and irrefutable. Before this, Darknorth had only heard about it, but didn't know the details. In fact, most of the information had been deliberately covered up. It was not until this moment that Darknorth finally realized that while the Royal Preceptor was helping him rack his brains and share his worries, he had also done so many things to fill his own pockets and use public resources for private purposes. Rather than saying that the Imperial Tutor was helping him share his worries, it was better to say that the Imperial Tutor was secretly cultivating his forces and strengthening himself. Today, the Imperial Tutor's actual status and the power he wielded had far exceeded his expectations. Most importantly, many of the hundreds of domains and millions of people in the world thought that he was muddle-headed and incompetent, unworthy of the position of Dragon Emperor. Only the officials, generals, and domain masters under his command who knew the inside story were dissatisfied with the Imperial Tutor. To put it simply, he was the scapegoat, and the Imperial Tutor was the one to gain all the benefits and power. After reading the evidence in the 4 jade slips, Darknorth forcibly suppressed the anger in his heart and said calmly, Long Tian, thank you for helping me share my worries and taking the trouble to collect these evidence. I'll accept these things, but I still can't give you the results you want. Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and said coldly, I've known about the Imperial Tutor scheme for a long time. I even used a shadow retaining ball to record the process of him and his trusted aides. Originally, I wanted to let you see the shadow retaining ball after you finished reading the evidence. Now, it seems that there's no need for that. Darknorth stored the 4 jade slips into his interspatial ring and sighed. Actually, I've heard countless rumors about the Imperial Tutor over the past few hundred years. I am well aware of the fact that he eliminates dissidents and suppresses those who are loyal to him. It's just that I still have a lot of things to rely on him, and he hasn't overstepped his boundaries, so I can still tolerate it. Now that the divine palace is weak and has been ill for a long time, it is not the time to cut off our own arms." These words undoubtedly showed that he was aware of the imperial tutor's many crimes, but due to the current situation, he could not eliminate the imperial tutor for the time being. Ji Tianxing no longer tried to persuade him. He sneered and said, "Actually, you just don't want to bear the infamy of being ungrateful. Why do you have to make it so complicated? Since you don't want to be the bad guy, then let me be the bad guy." In any case, the imperial tutor and I were like fire and water. This was something that everyone in the celestial palace knew. It's only natural for me to kill him. "No." Dark North frowned and tried to dissuade him. "You can't kill him now. First, the situation in the celestial palace will be turbulent and bring unnecessary disasters. Second, if you kill the imperial tutor, you will definitely bear the crime and become the enemy of the celestial palace and the heavenly dragon continent. Even if you don't fear being besieged by the world, I can't let you suffer an injustice. What's more, this grand mystery cave heaven is your former residence, and all the people in this world are your master's people." Ji Tianxing was unmoved and said expressionlessly, "If I insist on killing the imperial tutor, what can you do?" Dark North was at a loss for words. He smiled bitterly and said, "With your strength and means, I naturally can't stop you. But this is not a personal grudge, nor is it a Jianghu vendetta. You can just sit and watch. But why do you have to mess up the situation and make it difficult for me? Are you blaming me for being nosy?" Ji Tianxing frowned, and his eyes became colder. That's not what I meant." Dark North hurriedly waved his hand to explain, but Ji Tianxing was too lazy to listen and turned to leave. Seeing this, Dark North could only get up and said solemnly, "Long Tian, if you are still willing to believe me, then I swear here to the spirit of the heavenly dragon emperor in heaven, no matter what, I will protect the grand mystery cave heaven and the heavenly dragon divine palace, and protect the foundation of the heavenly dragon continent. Even if my body and bones are smashed and my soul destroyed, I will never let the hundreds of millions of people on this continent fall into war and disaster." Ji Tianxing stopped and turned to look at Dark North, watching him solemnly swear to the heavens. He could see that Dark North's thoughts, tone, and eyes were all sincere, and his words were also from the bottom of his heart. After swearing, Dark North said to him again, "Don't worry, I know what to do, but the time is not yet right. You have only come back once in more than 1,000 years, so you don't have to worry about these things anymore. Go and see the scenery of your old home, and visit the old place again. When the Qing Wan ancestor replies, I will inform you immediately." Since the words had already been said, there was no point in continuing to entangle. Ji Tianxing no longer cared about this matter and turned to leave the study. From the moment he left the study, his aura was hidden and his figure became transparent. Next, he no longer cared about the heavenly dragon divine palace and the imperial tutor and wandered in the grand mystery cave heaven in a transparent state. He first went to the divine sword peak and strolled freely on the peak. The ancient pine trees, vertical rocks, and waterfalls of the past were still there, and there was not much difference from more than 1,000 years ago. Even the divine sword palace, which had been renamed the Imperial Tutor Palace, had most likely retained its former layout. Under the eaves of the various corridors, he had walked countless times. The various gardens and courtyards were also the places where he had comprehended the sword Tao and practiced sword techniques countless times. Even the dozens of golden dragon spiritual fish in the lotus pond had now grown countless times and had cultivated into extraordinary spiritual beasts and were about to turn into dragons. It was a pity that he remained invisible and there was no aura at all. Even though he had been standing by the lotus pond for a long time, the dozens of golden dragon spiritual fish did not notice him, and they did not surround him like before, calling him Brother Tian and asking for spiritual fruits. Of course, the heavy guards inside and outside the Imperial Tutor Palace did not notice him either. Those defensive divine arrays and restrictions were useless to him. After wandering around the Divine Sword Peak for half a day, Ji Tianxing went to the other peaks and continued to wander in the heavenly dragon divine palace. After spending 4 to 5 days, he had wandered around the 100 peaks of the heavenly dragon divine palace, and then he wandered around the grand mystery, cave heaven. Even though the cave heaven was very big, it was very familiar everywhere. Every mountain, every river, every flower, and every tree hid his memories of the past. After wandering around and seeing the scenery of the past, his state of mind became much calmer and more tranquil. At this time, the imperial tutor and his many divine generals, as well as tens of thousands of elite experts, finally gave up after 7 days. In these 7 days, under the leadership of the imperial tutor, they searched the entire grand mystery, cave heaven crazily, just to find Long Tian. However, they found nothing. Chapter 3866. The imperial tutor had planned everything and mobilized 24 god generals and close to 10,000 elite soldiers. Everything was ready, but Soaring Dragon Palace was empty-handed. Long Tian had mysteriously disappeared, and he could not find him even after searching the entire Grand Mystery Grotto Heaven. The imperial tutor was furious and wanted to vent his anger on Long Xiang. He wanted to find a reason to punish him. Unexpectedly, Long Xiang had been hiding in a secret room to recuperate and did not show himself. The imperial tutor did not know where to start. He could not forcibly break into Soaring Dragon Palace, capture Long Xiang, and then announce his crimes, right? This method was too clumsy and despicable. Dark North would never agree to it. The imperial tutor could only suppress his anger and record this down. He would settle this with Long Xiang in the future. Those 24 god generals and 10,000 elite soldiers were ordered by the imperial tutor to return to the Grand Mystery Grotto Heaven. They could not leave for too long. Dark North could still turn a blind eye to it for a short 7 days. If they continued to stay in the Grand Mystery Grotto Heaven, Dark North would definitely punish them for leaving their post. Thus, the imperial tutor could only let them go and return to their posts. He also did not have the time and energy to continue searching for Long Tian. He could only angrily believe that Long Tian was powerful and had escaped from the Grand Mystery Grotto Heaven without anyone knowing. That night, the messengers suddenly informed the imperial tutor and the southern conquering generals to go to the study to discuss important military matters. The imperial tutor could only put aside the matter of killing Long Tian and go to the study with the 6 southern conquering generals. The study was brightly lit and the atmosphere was solemn. Dark North sat behind the desk with a jade slip and a memorial in front of him. The imperial tutor and the 6 southern conquering generals stood in the study, their postures respectful and reserved. Of course, Long Xiang was not among the 6 southern conquering generals. He was still recuperating in a secret room. Everyone, I receive an urgent report from the 3 southeastern regions tonight. The sea tribe that retreated not long ago is gathering again to attack the 3 regions. This time, the sea tribe might have gathered more than 80,000 soldiers. Thus, the attack on the 3 regions this time will be more tragic than before. Dark North looked at everyone with a solemn expression and explained the reason. The 6 generals of the southern expedition suddenly became nervous, revealing expressions of righteous indignation. The imperial tutor furrowed his brows and thought for a while. Then he said in a deep voice, Long Xiang and the other 2 southern expedition generals have been investigating and resisting the attacks of the Sea Tribe in the past 3 years. In the end, after the Flying Dragon Special Forces lost, they fled back to the God Palace. That was why the Sea Race decided to make a comeback and gather even more elites when they realized that the power of the 3 southeastern regions was lacking. If that's the case, General Long Xiang can't absolve himself from the blame. As long as there was a chance, the imperial tutor wouldn't forget to slander the Flying Dragon Special Forces. Of the other 6 southern expedition generals, 4 bought over by the imperial tutor, and only 2 remained neutral. When they heard the imperial tutor slandering the Flying Dragon Special Forces, the 2 of them frowned. However, they couldn't refute him. Dark North said calmly, However, General Long Xiang has experienced many dangers and made great contributions. His investigation results are basically correct. The news from the three southeastern regions also confirms that the Sea tribe is from the Trench tribe. The Imperial Tutor snorted when he saw Dark North defending the Flying Dragon Special Forces. He didn't say anything else. Dark North said in a dignified tone, "I summoned all of you here to give you a heavy responsibility. I have decided to mobilize 100,000 elite soldiers and rush to the three southeastern regions to kill the invaders." This time, he was going to beat the oceanic race into a sorry state. He was going to teach them a lesson they would never forget. Only then can they be obedient and intimidate the other three tribes. After all, the Trench tribe has repeatedly attacked my territory without being punished. This will definitely make the other three tribes restless. Do the few of you have any objections? The 6 Southern Expedition generals naturally didn't have any objections. They quickly bowed and said in unison, "Yes, Your Majesty. We will be on standby at any time. We are willing to charge and fight a bloody battle." Dark North nodded in satisfaction and said, "I have confidence in your ability to lead troops. However, this mission is very difficult. We can't afford to fail. Therefore, I have decided to send the Imperial Tutor to lead the 100,000 soldiers." At this point, Dark North looked at Imperial Tutor and asked, "Imperial Tutor, are you willing to go to war for me and share my burden?" The Imperial Tutor was stunned. He frowned and didn't say anything. He had been staying in the Taishian cave heaven. At most, he would patrol the various regions. He was basically only in charge of government affairs and had never led an army into battle. He didn't expect that the Dragon Emperor would suddenly ask him to lead the expedition. Moreover, it was to attack the Sea tribe in the southeast. This was too unexpected. After being stunned for a moment, the Imperial Tutor suddenly thought of something. A cold light flashed in his eyes. Then, he bowed to Dark North and said in a serious tone, "Although I have never led an army into battle, Your Majesty has ordered me to do my best. I have no problem leading the expedition, but, Your Majesty, who have you decided to send to lead the troops?" Dark North pointed to the 6 Southern Expedition generals and said, "Of course it's the 6 of them. Otherwise, why would I summon them here?" The Imperial Tutor looked at the 6 generals and shook his head. He said, "Your Majesty, I think that General Sun Yin has not led an army for more than 120 years and has not been to the 3 southeastern regions before. This expedition, we swear to win, and win beautifully. Therefore, General Sun Yin, please stay in the Divine Palace and wait for orders." As soon as these words were spoken, everyone in the study focused their attention on a dark-skinned, middle-aged general. This stout and honest-looking general was suddenly embarrassed. His face turned dark red, and his eyes flashed with shame and anger. He was originally a hot-blooded and heroic general with outstanding talent in leading troops. However, he was upright and honest, and had been loyal to the Imperial Tutor many times. It was because of the Imperial Tutor's deliberate suppression that he lost the right to lead troops and stayed in the Taishian cave heaven for more than 120 years. General Sun Yin thought that the Dragon Emperor's urgent summons would be his chance to rise again. He did not expect that, just as he saw a glimmer of hope, it would be extinguished by the Imperial Tutor. Dark North obviously understood the twists and turns in this matter, but he did not want to embarrass the Imperial Tutor over such a small matter. Therefore, he asked expressionlessly, "Then who does the Imperial Tutor think is suitable to replace General Sun Yin?" The Imperial Tutor replied without hesitation, "I think that General Long Xiong is the most suitable. Firstly, Long Xiong made a mistake before, and Your Majesty was kind enough to not punish him too much. However, he should atone for his mistakes and repay Your Majesty's favor and nurturing. Secondly, I'm not clear about the actual situation in the 3 southeastern regions. Long Xiong has been active there for 3 years and knows the actual situation like the back of his hand. It is more advantageous for us to send him to lead the troops. Your Majesty, please make a decision." Dark North knew that the Imperial Tutor was unhappy with Long Xiong and was deliberately suppressing him. However, the Imperial Tutor's 2 points were indeed reasonable, and he could not refute them. After pondering for a while, Dark North nodded in agreement. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 3867. The Imperial Tutor and the generals stayed in the study for 2 hours. Dark North discussed the battle plan with them and also discussed many detailed issues. After 2 hours, they left the study and went back to prepare for the battle. The 2 messenger guards also left the Dragon Emperor Divine Palace and went to the Soaring Dragon Palace to read Dark North's order. The sun shone brightly, and the guards and soldiers of Soaring Dragon Palace were currently relaxed. The 2 messenger guards came with the Dragon Emperor's order. Everyone was immediately energized and led the way to the living room. At the same time, the 2 soldiers rushed to the secret room where Long Xiang was recuperating to report this matter. After a while, Long Xiang ended his recuperation and rushed to the living room. As soon as he entered the living room, the 2 messenger guards took out the order and read it out loud. The war in the 3 southeastern regions is urgent. The Sea Tribe has gathered their army again and will invade the borders in the next few days. General Long Xiang, prepare for battle immediately. Dark North's order was not announced to the world, so it was not so formal. It was just a verbal order. But the Dragon Emperor's verbal order must be obeyed and carried out. Long Xiang frowned and had mixed feelings, but he still bowed respectfully to show that he would obey the Dragon Emperor's order. The 2 messengers quickly left to report back to Dark North. Long Xiang sat on a chair in the living room and rubbed his forehead, thinking about the meaning of the order. When I came back to report, His Majesty knew that I was seriously injured and was very sure of my contribution. He also encouraged me verbally. At that time, His Majesty told me to recuperate in seclusion and that he would take care of this matter. But how long has it been? His Majesty knows that I have not fully recovered. So why did he send me to lead the army? Long Xiang vaguely felt that there must be something wrong with the Dragon Emperor's order. Therefore, he hurriedly sent out 2 deputy generals and more than 10 bodyguards to scout for information. He waited in the study for 2 hours. The deputies and soldiers returned one after another and reported a series of news. Only then did he know that the Dragon Emperor had summoned the Imperial Tutor and the 6 generals last night and discussed in the study for 2 hours. Originally, the Dragon Emperor had planned to send the 6 generals to the battle. However, the Imperial Tutor had suggested that General Sun Yin stay behind so that he could lead the army. After understanding the whole story, Long Xiang was even more confused. His Majesty has sent out 100,000 elite soldiers and even let the Imperial Tutor take command. This expedition is obviously the best opportunity to make a contribution. It was understandable for the Imperial Tutor to suppress General Sun Yin. After all, the grudges between the 2 of them had been building up for a long time. But why didn't he send his own trusted aides? Why did he send me to lead the troops? Just because I'm more familiar with the situation in the 3 southeastern regions? Would the Imperial Tutor be so kind as to give this opportunity to me? Although the Flying Dragon Special Forces didn't have any objections to the idea of leading the troops in a battle, they were willing to accept this opportunity to gain merit. However, when the Imperial Tutor brought up this matter, he felt that it was very unusual. With the Imperial Tutor's temperament, he would never take the initiative to do him a favor and make up with him. This must be the Imperial Tutor's scheme. I'm the commander, and he's the commander. He's definitely trying to frame me. After careful consideration, the Flying Dragon Special Forces came to this conclusion and firmly believed it. However, the Dragon Emperor's orders couldn't be disobeyed. He could only accept the order and go into battle. However, he would be careful and always be on guard against the Imperial Tutor. The situation in the 3 southeastern regions was urgent. The Imperial Tutor and the 6 southern conquering generals didn't dare to delay. After receiving the order, they used 6 hours to complete their preparations and left the Grand Mystery Cave Heaven at noon to lead the troops into battle. After the Imperial Tutor left, the Grand Mystery Cave Heaven calmed down and everything became orderly. Many generals and experts who had grudges with the Imperial Tutor secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Dark North was as busy as ever. He had endless government affairs to deal with every day. He had no choice. His prestige and control weren't strong enough. He couldn't give all his power to the ruler of the 100 regions. He had to take care of everything personally and keep an eye on the ruler of the 100 regions. Only then could he ensure the peace and tranquility of the heavenly dragon continent. He didn't know how long this situation would last. He could only relax when the ruler of the 100 regions was willing to submit and no longer had any disloyalty. Ji Tianxing no longer cared about the heavenly dragon divine palace and the continent. He focused on being an invisible person and strolled around the grand mystery, Cave Heaven. After more than 10 days, he walked around the grand mystery, Cave Heaven, and saw the scenery of his hometown. After he relaxed and calmed down, his state of mind changed, and he gained some enlightenment. His understanding of the great Tao of heaven and earth was deeper. His foundation of the divine Tao was more stable, and his strength was quietly increasing. Finally, half a month passed. On the evening of the 16th day, Dark North sent him a message. He ended his tour and returned to the study of the Dragon Emperor Divine Palace to meet Dark North again. This time, the atmosphere was much more relaxed and peaceful. Dark North smiled and asked, "You've been walking around the grand mystery, Cave Heaven, and seeing the scenery of your hometown. How do you feel now?" Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and said, "I'm enlightened. At the same time, I feel more enlightened." Dark North raised his eyebrows. Naturally, he understood the meaning of this sentence. However, he didn't continue the conversation. He took out a communication jade slip and handed it to Ji Tianxing. "This is a reply from the Blue Phoenix Patriarch. I just received it and didn't have time to check it." After that, he handed the communication jade slip to Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing took the jade slip and asked with a playful smile, "This is a message from the Blue Phoenix Patriarch. If there's any confidential information in it, it's not appropriate for me to read it, right? Why don't you read it first and tell me the answer after reading it?" Dark North waved his hand and said disapprovingly, "The Blue Phoenix Patriarch and I don't have any personal relationship. How can there be confidential information? There's nothing that can't be told. Don't worry and read it." Ji Tianxing didn't say anything more and read the message in the jade slip with his divine sense. "Your Majesty Dragon Emperor, I've been cultivating in seclusion in the cave residence and haven't left for hundreds of years. I don't know about the matter that you mentioned." Just these two simple sentences. There wasn't even any extra greetings or intention to help. The facts proved that Dark North didn't lie. The Blue Phoenix Patriarch really didn't have any personal relationship with him. Otherwise, the reply wouldn't be so cold and dull. Ji Tianxing put down the communication jade slip. His expression was a little gloomy as he said, "The Blue Phoenix Patriarch has been cultivating in seclusion in the cave residence and doesn't know about this matter. The matter has been clarified. I'll leave today." Dark North didn't pretend to urge him to stay. He nodded and said, "Don't worry. I'll try to contact other peak divine kings and try my best to help you inquire about this matter." "Thank you." Ji Tianxing cupped his hands and bowed. He returned the communication jade slip to Dark North and turned to leave the study. If not for the Blue Phoenix Patriarch's reply, he would have left long ago. Therefore, after receiving the Blue Phoenix Patriarch's reply, he left very decisively. Not long after, he left the Grand Mystery Grotto Heaven. Next, he flew all the way to the south. He prepared to leave the Sky Dragon continent and head to the Crimson Dragon continent. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 3868. The Heavenly Dragon continent was at the top left of the Dragon Realm map, while the Crimson Dragon continent was at the bottom left. If Ji Tianxing wanted to go to the Crimson Dragon continent, he only needed to fly south. However, the distance between the two continents was very far. Even with his speed, it would take him 2 months to reach there. Although the journey was very boring, he used the Burial of Heaven to travel while he stayed in the Sword World to cultivate in the distorted space-time. Therefore, traveling did not hinder him from improving his strength. 20 days later, the Burial of Heaven crossed half of the Heavenly Dragon continent and arrived at the southernmost sea region of the continent. After entering the Sky Sea region, the Burial of Heaven did not slow down and flew across the sky as usual. At this time, Ji Tianxing had been cultivating in seclusion in the distorted space-time for 33 months. After close to 3 years of cultivation, his strength had improved, and he was not far from the 9th level of the Divine King realm. After cultivating in seclusion for a long time, he would feel bored, so he closed his eyes and rested for a few days. Once he had time to think, the first thought in his mind was, "It's been a few months. Why is there still no news from the Black Dragon Emperor? This guy has always been unreliable. He can't have forgotten about me, right?" Thinking of this problem, Ji Tianxing felt a headache coming on. He could not help but send a message to the Black Dragon Emperor, urging him to find out the news as soon as possible. However, he did not receive a reply from the Black Dragon Emperor, even after sending the message for a long time. Ji Tianxing was a little angry and thought to himself, "Old Black Dragon, although you are usually unreliable, you know that this matter is very important to me, yet you are still so lazy. The next time we meet, I'll teach you a lesson." According to his plan, after leaving the Star Source continent, his first stop would be the Heavenly Dragon continent, and his second stop would be the Crimson Dragon continent. His third stop would be the Holy Dragon continent at the bottom right corner of the Dragon Realm map, and his last stop would be the Black Dragon continent at the top right corner of the map. If there was still no news from the Black Dragon Emperor when he reached the Black Dragon continent, he would really be angry. At the same time, in the depths of the Sky Sea in the south of the Heavenly Dragon continent, the Flying Dragon Special Forces were leading 15,000 elite soldiers. They were driving 15 divine warships and flying as fast as lightning. A month ago, under the leadership of the Imperial Tutor, he and the 5 Southern Expedition Generals led 100,000 elite soldiers to the 3 southeastern regions. However, before arriving at the 3 southeastern regions, the Imperial Tutor had the army split up. The 6 generals each led more than 10,000 men and rushed to the 3 coastal regions. The Flying Dragon Special Forces and the other 2 generals were against the Imperial Tutor's decision. 100,000 elite troops were originally a lion army. If they were used properly, they would definitely be invincible. However, if they followed the Imperial Tutor's method of dividing the army of 100,000 into 6 teams, their combat strength and deterrence would be greatly reduced. This was a taboo for military strategists. In the past, the Imperial Tutor's job was more of a civil official, and he was not proficient in leading troops. However, he was stubborn and used his status and military orders to suppress the 3 from the Flying Dragon Special Forces. The 3 of them had no choice but to submit and follow the orders of the Imperial Tutor. 2 of the Southern Expedition Generals were sent to the Yongfeng region in the east, while the other 2 were sent to the Shanghai region in the middle. The Imperial Tutor was in charge of the Shanghai region and looked after the 2 generals. After all, they had already joined the Imperial Tutor and were the Imperial Tutor's trusted aides. The Flying Dragon Special Forces and the other Southern Expedition General had old grudges with the Imperial Tutor and were sent to the Chengkong region. Geographically speaking, although the Chengkong region was in the southeast of the continent, it was closer to the south. The Flying Dragon Special Forces and General Miyu both felt that the Imperial Tutor was definitely plotting something. However, the 2 of them could not find any clues and could not analyze anything. As the war was urgent, the 2 of them put aside their distracting thoughts and focused on leading the troops. In their minds, these were the elite troops personally appointed by the Dragon Emperor. The outcome of this battle would affect the reputation of the Dragon Emperor and the God Palace. No matter how stupid and dictatorial the Imperial Tutor was, he would not make a fuss about this matter. Obtaining victory as soon as possible and chasing away the invaders of the sea race was the best outcome for everyone. The Flying Dragon Special Forces and General Muyu rested in the Chengkong region for 2 days and collected a large amount of battle reports. They had a clearer understanding of the military situation. After analyzing and discussing, the 2 of them decided to take the initiative to attack the sea race army that was gathering in the deep sea. At this moment, the 15 divine warships were carrying 15,000 elite troops and were rushing towards the depths of the Sky Sea. In the leading divine warship, the Flying Dragon Special Forces and Muyu were in the meeting room. They were carefully analyzing the information on hand and deducing the upcoming battle situation. We know of 3 assembly points of the Sea Race's army. The first target is the Bolu city in the Bola region. That is the territory of the Trench tribe. Under the deep sea, it is dark and cold. The environment is very complicated. We do not know much about the territory of the sea race. We only know the rough location of the Bola city, but not the specific situation. Therefore, we must be careful and alert. The Flying Dragon Special Forces held a cup of hot tea and said solemnly. Muyu frowned and thought for a moment. She nodded and said, "This is our disadvantage, but it can also be our advantage. After all, the sea race knows that we are blind and will think that we do not dare to step into the deep sea. Thus, they will let down their guard. As long as we use our troops well, we will be able to catch them off guard." Speaking of which, General Long has been investigating the coastal area for 3 years and has a good understanding of the sea race. This is also one of our advantages. The Flying Dragon Special Forces put down the teacup with a worried expression. He said in a low voice, "I do not know why, but I have a bad premonition." Muyu frowned and comforted. "General Long, I can understand your feelings. After all, the Imperial Tutor is a layman when it comes to leading troops. I also feel uneasy. However, we must believe in our own abilities. No matter what happens, we must act according to the situation." The Flying Dragon Special Forces did not say anything else and continued to look and analyze the information. Unknowingly, another day had passed. The 15 divine warships finally arrived at the Bola region. They entered the sea and sailed towards the Bolu city in the depths of the sea. The depth of the sea was more than 10,000 feet. The bottom of the sea was pitch black and bone-chillingly cold. The pressure was terrifying. The divine warships and soldiers would definitely be affected if they moved underwater. It would not be as smooth as the sea race. Half a day later, the 15 divine warships finally arrived at Bola City. It was a city hidden in a wide trench, surrounded by a circle of reefs and mountains. The city had a radius of 100 miles and was basically built with pitch-black rocks. It could accommodate hundreds of thousands of sea race citizens. However, the Flying Dragon Special Forces and Muyu realized that the Bola city, which should have 20,000 sea race troops, was abnormally quiet. The two of them felt that it was strange and sent out over 100 scouts to quietly approach Bola city. Not long after, the scouts returned one after another, reporting a shocking result to the two of them. There was no one in Bola city. There was no sea race army. This result filled the Flying Dragon Special Forces and Muyu with doubt and disbelief. However, the Flying Dragon Special Forces quickly guessed something and his expression changed. "Not good, this is a trap. Retreat." Wonderful Book House. Chapter 3869. Muyu was also an experienced general who was good at war. When he came to Bola city, he felt that something was wrong. When Long Xiang shouted those words, he instantly understood Long Xiang's meaning and his expression changed. "Retreat. Leave this place immediately." His voice was as loud as a bell as he roared. At the same time, he used his consciousness to transmit his orders to the dozen or so divine ships. Fortunately, the 15,000 soldiers did not rashly leave the divine warships and were still on standby. After hearing the orders of the two divine generals, the pilots of the 15 divine warships retreated without hesitation and quickly turned around to leave Bola city. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. A moment later, the 15 divine warships broke through the sea and rushed into the sky like dazzling lights. Although the sky was still clear and the sun was high in the sky and the sea was empty, Long Xiang and Muyu released their divine sense to scan the surrounding 50,000 miles, and their expressions changed again. They saw that on the sea tens of thousands of miles away, there were two mighty armies of the sea race. They were attacking from the east and west respectively, and each army had about 20,000 sea race soldiers. Above their heads were seabirds that blotted out the sky. The enormous soldiers of the sea tribe lined up in the air above the sea like a surging tide. Even though they were tens of thousands of miles away, Long Xiang and Muyu could feel that the air above the sea began to become violent. Surging murderous aura was also constantly spreading. "We have fallen into a trap. This is a trap of the sea race," Long Xiang said with a gloomy expression, his eyes flashing with murderous intent. Damn it! How did the sea race know our target and movement and set up an ambush in advance? Muyu was also filled with anger, her body bursting with murderous intent. The two of them were not stupid people. When this question was raised, they immediately had a guess in their minds. Then, the two of them looked at each other and understood that they had the same answer. It's him. How can he be so crazy? Ignoring the interests of the Divine Palace and the safety of hundreds of millions of people? In order to eliminate dissidents, he is actually so vicious. This is simply unforgivable. Long Xiang and Muyu, who had guessed the truth, were even more furious and their bodies trembled. Of course, it would be more appropriate to describe their emotions as grief and indignation. If I can survive this battle, even if I have to give it my all, I will take him down with me. Muyu clenched her fists and roared while gnashing her teeth. Long Xiang took a few deep breaths and forcefully suppressed his anger. He patted his shoulder and said in a deep voice, I also have the same idea, but now is not the time to think about it. Our top priority right now is to bring our soldiers back. Only if we survive can we have the right to talk about revenge. With that, Long Xiang gave another order to the soldiers on the divine warships. He asked them to push the speed of the divine warships to the maximum at all costs. More than 10,000 soldiers also realized that they had fallen into a trap and were in imminent danger. In their nervousness and desperation, everyone unleashed all their divine power to help the divine ship reach its maximum speed. Swish! Swish! With a sharp sound of tearing through the air, the 15 divine battleships all turned into streaks of light and shot into the blue sky, flying towards the north. The armies of the oceanic species that were charging from the east and west kept their eyes on the 15 divine battleships. Seeing the divine battleships speeding towards the north, the two armies of the oceanic species adjusted their direction and chased after them. Although the oceanic species' refining skills were not high and could not be compared to the Yao species, they were the oceanic species. They were the overlords of the deep sea, and their speed in the sea was faster than most of the Yao species. With the orders of the oceanic species generals, most of the oceanic species entered the sea and used the power of the sea to rush towards the north. A few seabirds and divine king experts flew across the sky as fast as lightning, chasing after the 15 divine battleships. Although the 15 divine battleships consumed a lot of divine stones and were supported by the divine power of the soldiers, their speed was raised to the maximum. However, the 40,000 oceanic species army was not slow either. They were always 40,000 miles behind the divine battleships and were not shaken off by the fleet. Both sides started a chase in the sky and sea, moving towards the north at an extremely fast speed. Long Xiang, Muyu, and the 15,000 soldiers were safe for the time being. However, their hearts were always in their throats, and their emotions were tense. On the other hand, the two oceanic species armies were not in a hurry, as if victory was already in their grasp, because they knew that although the fleet was fast, it consumed a lot of divine stones and divine power. The fleet would not be able to last for long, and its speed would decrease. At that time, they would be able to surround the fleet and kill the 15,000 Yao species soldiers, forever leaving them in the deep sea. This pursuit with the most powerful flames lasted for an entire day before it ended. Although Long Xiang and Muyu's fleet had traveled 30 million miles north, they were still unable to escape the deep sea. The 15 divine battleships were overloaded, and after traveling for an entire day, not only did they use up more than half of the divine stones stored in the divine battleships, but they also exhausted the soldiers and weakened their divine power. Most importantly, cracks had appeared in the arrays of the divine battleships, and they were in imminent danger. If they continued to fly at their maximum speed, the arrays would collapse, and the divine battleships would not be able to fly. Helpless, the 15 divine battleships could only return to their normal speed and mobilize a group of soldiers to repair the arrays. The fleet slowed down, but the 40,000 oceanic species soldiers were not affected. They maintained their previous speed and steadily approached. Finally, When night fell, the two oceanic species armies succeeded in stalling the fleet. The first to be bitten by the oceanic species armies were the four divine battleships at the back of the fleet. The sea birds and oceanic species armies that blotted out the sky released endless divine light and ruthlessly bombarded the four divine battleships. Although the divine battleships activated their defensive barriers, they were still smashed into pieces and crashed into the sea. After the defensive barriers were shattered, the divine battleships were also riddled with holes and were on the verge of disintegration. The 4,000 Yao species soldiers in the divine battleships charged out of the divine battleships with the determination to die and started fighting with the oceanic species army. Originally, most of the oceanic species were busy attacking the 4,000 soldiers, and the remaining 11 divine battleships could take the opportunity to escape. However, Long Xiang and Mu Yu did not abandon the 4,000 soldiers. They decisively led 11,000 soldiers and launched a counterattack against the oceanic species army, vowing to save the 4,000 soldiers. This was because Long Xiang had a tradition of leading soldiers in a battle, and that was, until the last moment, he would never abandon his teammates. The two sides engaged in a great battle above the sea, releasing endless divine techniques and killing moves, causing the entire sea to be in chaos. Deafening noises, explosions, and divine light that blotted out the sky completely enveloped an area of 30,000 miles. Huge waves rose up in the sea, and violent hurricanes blew. Chapter 3870. The two sides fought fiercely on the sea for 2 hours. The battlefield was extremely tragic. More than 8,000 members of the sea race and 10,000 seabirds were killed by the goblin race soldiers. Their flesh and blood scattered in the sea. The seawater in a radius of 30,000 miles was dyed in a layer of dark red. As for the casualties of the demon race soldiers, they could only be described as tragic. More than 10,000 of the 15,000 soldiers died on the spot. Their flesh and blood fell into the sea. 9 out of the 15 divine warships were destroyed. They were all turned into scrap metal and fell into the depths of the sea. The remaining 5,000 goblin race soldiers were also covered in blood and wounds. They were extremely weak. These soldiers were like arrows at the end of their flight. Even the two divine generals, Long Xiang and Mu Yu, were covered in blood and wounds. After all, the two of them were at the forefront of the battlefield. If they continued to fight, the remaining 5,000 goblin race soldiers would definitely be slaughtered by the 30,000 sea race soldiers. Long Xiang and Mu Yu were brave and courageous, but they were not stubborn and pedantic people. Of course, they knew that the situation was hopeless and there was nothing they could do. The only thing they could do was to lead the remaining 5,000 goblin race soldiers and escape with all their might. Only by surviving would they have the hope of revenge. Not only did they have to take revenge on the sea race, but they also had to take revenge on the bastard who colluded with the sea race and used unscrupulous means to eliminate his enemies. Retreat. Retreat. Long Xiang and Mu Yu led 1,000 goblin race soldiers to bring up the rear for the remaining 4,000 goblin race soldiers. They covered them as they boarded the divine warships and escaped the battlefield. In a short span of 100 breaths, 1,000 goblin race soldiers were sacrificed and lost their lives in the sea. Even Mu Yu, in order to stop the sea race's divine kings, fought until the end and was killed by the sea race's divine kings. He was blasted into pieces. His blood splattered all over the sky and scattered in the sky above the battlefield. Even his godhead was shattered by the sea race's divine kings. He was completely dead. Before he died, he did not forget to shout at Long Xiang, "No matter what, you must bring everyone back. You must survive. Only by surviving can you take revenge for us." Mu Yu's hoarse shout reverberated in Long Xiang's mind. He could completely feel the grief and despair in Mu Yu's heart at the moment of her death. Therefore, he did not hesitate to lead the surviving goblin race soldiers back to the heavenly dragon continent. However, the 4,000 surviving soldiers were all injured and their strength had been greatly weakened. Even though they were piloting 5 divine warships and fleeing with all their might, their speed was still far from satisfactory. Goblin race soldiers of the sea, goblin race soldiers of the goblin races, goblin race soldiers. Over 30,000 sea creatures spread out, forming an encirclement of 20,000 miles in circumference above the sea. Even if the 5 divine warships flew into the sky or entered the sea, they would not be able to escape the encirclement of the sea race's army. The encirclement of the sea tribe's army was gradually shrinking. The 5 divine warships were attacked by many divine spells, and their movements became slower and slower. The surface of the divine warships was also riddled with holes. Goblin, N, of goof goblin race, of goblin goblin goblin, of goof of goblin race. Long Xiang's eyes dimmed. His heart was filled with grief. He could not help but roar. Imperial Tutor, General Muyu, I, and 15,000 goblin race soldiers died in your hands. You vicious bastard. Even if we die and turn into vengeful spirits, we will not let you go. Long Xiang knew that he was going to die. He did not hide anything. He roared unscrupulously. He vented all the grief and hatred in his heart. The 4,000 goblin race soldiers only knew that they had fallen into the goblin race's trap and ambush. They did not know and did not dare to believe that the Imperial Tutor had something to do with this scheme. When the soldiers heard the Flying Dragon Special Forces shouts, they were stunned. Then, they realized that the Imperial Tutor had colluded with the goblin race and betrayed them. Everyone was enlightened. They did not doubt this conclusion. The 4,000 goblin race soldiers cursed the Imperial Tutor. They were filled with grief and indignation. Long Xiang calmed down. He quickly shouted, "Everyone calm down. No matter how much we curse, it will not help us. Now, we need to unite and break through the encirclement. We need to escape with our lives." After he finished speaking, Long Xiang led his lieutenants and soldiers out of the goblin race warships. They used all kinds of divine skills to launch a counterattack. The sea species army in all directions immediately unleashed their divine abilities and blasted them toward Long Xiang and the soldiers. Long Xiang was at the front. He used the divine light to protect his body. He waved his sword and spear to destroy the divine light in the sky. His lieutenants and soldiers followed behind him. They charged with the belief that they would die. A few hundred soldiers flew out of the 5 goblin race warships and joined the charge fearlessly. They charged towards the goblin race army in the north. What welcomed them was the merciless attack of the goblin race army. Boom, 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 boom. With a series of deafening explosions, hundreds of demon race soldiers were blasted to pieces, turning into a rain of blood and flesh that filled the sky. Other than Long Xiang, his 2 lieutenants, and more than 100 soldiers, the other 500 were killed before they could even get close to the goblin race army. Long Xiang charged forward without any regard for his own safety. However, he was blocked twice by the goblin race experts. When he charged forward for the 3rd time, 5 goblin race experts attacked together and sent him flying. He fell into the sea in a sorry state. His injuries were even worse. He was bleeding from all 7 orifices. His strength was also extremely weak. Is today the day of my death? Is everything going to end? As he fell into the sea from the sky, Long Xiang's eyes were wide open with unwillingness. He cried out in grief and indignation. At this moment, he suddenly realized that in the northern night sky, in the depths of the darkness, there was a dazzling divine light rapidly approaching. Under the pitch-black night sky, that golden divine light was as dazzling as a shooting star. Long Xiang, who was already filled with despair, was stunned. Then his eyes shone with the light of hope. From the aura of that golden light, it was definitely an extremely powerful goblin race expert. At this moment, to appear alone in the depths of the sky sea, it was either a goblin race expert or a goblin race expert. Long Xiang thought that he and his soldiers were definitely going to die. Even if that golden light was a goblin race expert, their fate would not change. However, if that golden light was a goblin race expert, then the outcome might be different. Thinking of this, Long Xiang immediately pulled himself together. He led the surviving soldiers and continued to charge forward. As for that shooting star-like golden light, it did not deviate or dodge. It accelerated towards the battlefield. Chapter 38:71. The God King expert in the golden light saw that there was a battle in the sea, but he still sped up and rushed over. This confirmed Long Xiang's guess. He was even more certain that the God King expert in the golden light was from the demon race and not the sea race. As expected, swoosh! After 5 breaths, the golden light cut through the darkness and flew over from the horizon. It was like an unstoppable shooting star that ignored the encirclement of the 30,000 sea race soldiers and rushed to the center of the battlefield. Wherever it passed, the dazzling golden light burned hundreds of sea race soldiers and thousands of seabirds into ashes. This scene gave the more than 3,000 demon soldiers a glimpse of hope, and their spirits were lifted. At the same time, the 30,000 sea race soldiers were on high alert and guarded against the golden light. When the golden light landed in the center of the battlefield, the battle paused for a moment. Everyone's eyes were focused on it. Swoosh! The dazzling golden light receded, revealing a handsome and valiant figure. It was a tall young man in a white robe. There were golden dragon scales on his wrists and the back of his hands. There was a divine dragon horn on his forehead. Obviously, this was a God King expert from the dragon race. He stood proudly in the night sky and did not care about the encirclement of the 30,000 sea race soldiers. His gaze swept across the battlefield and finally landed on Long Xiang and the others. When he saw Long Xiang's face, he was stunned for a moment. Then, he revealed an inexplicable smile. I was just passing by and felt that there was a battle here. There was also a large amount of demon race aura, so I rushed over to check the situation. I didn't expect you to be so forgetful. Why did you come to the deep sea again? The young man in the white robe looked at Long Xiang with a smile and teased him. When Long Xiang saw his face and heard his words, he was so excited that he almost cried. There's always a way out. We are saved. Senior Long Tian, you are definitely the savior of my Flying Dragon Special Forces. At this moment, Long Xiang was excited and his blood was boiling. The grief and despair in his heart had dissipated. He did not care about his injuries and bowed deeply to Long Tian in front of the 30,000 people. The 3,000 demon race soldiers who were lucky enough to survive still did not understand the situation. But when they saw Long Xiang's reaction, they knew that everyone was saved. Although the young man from the dragon clan by the name of Long Tian was alone, no one dared to believe that he could fight against the Oceanic Tribe's army of 30,000. However, in such a desperate situation, it was already extremely fortunate for a divine king of the dragon clan to come to their rescue. This made everyone shed tears of gratitude. Without a doubt, the white-robed dragon clan youth was Ji Tianxing. Originally, the Sword of Burial of Heaven had been flying south, ready to cross the sky sea and head to the Crimson Dragon continent. But just now, the Burial of Heaven sensed that there was an earth-shattering battle in the sea 80,000 kilometers away. Moreover, it also sensed the violent and chaotic aura of the demon clan. It told Ji Tianxing the news, and Ji Tianxing ended his cultivation without hesitation and rushed over to see what was going on. He didn't expect to meet the Flying Dragon Special Forces again. Furthermore, the Flying Dragon Special Forces situation was exactly the same as the first time they met. Ji Tianxing also admired the Flying Dragon Special Forces. To think that the Flying Dragon Special Forces were able to push him to the brink of death twice in a row. That was why he had teased him a little. Flying Dragon Special Forces, for someone like you to lead troops in a battle, even if you have a few lives, it won't be enough. I'm really curious. How did you manage to survive until now? Ji Tianxing looked down at the Flying Dragon Special Forces. He waved his hand and sent a ray of divine light into the Flying Dragon Special Forces body to help him suppress his injuries. The Flying Dragon Special Forces immediately looked ashamed. He cupped his hands and bowed. Senior Long Tian, this is a long story. Please allow me to explain it to you later. Our 15,000 soldiers were slaughtered until only 3,000 were left. We hope that you can save us. We will be eternally grateful. The 3,000 soldiers and the 5 divine warships all looked at Ji Tianxing and prayed silently in their hearts. Ji Tianxing was a little speechless. He smiled and said, "You always say that you're eternally grateful. How can you repay me with just a few words? Forget it. Seeing that you're loyal to the people, I'll help you one more time." After he finished speaking, he waved his hand and sent out a few rays of golden light that enveloped the 5 divine warships in the night sky. Swish, swish, swish. After the golden light flashed, the 5 divine warships and the dozens of soldiers beside the flying dragon special forces disappeared. They were all kept into the world of the primordial chaos bell by Ji Tianxing and landed on a patch of grass. Only Ji Tianxing and the flying dragon special forces were left in the sky. They were still surrounded by the 30,000 sea race soldiers. The hundreds of sea race generals and dozens of sea race god kings saw Ji Tianxing arrive and save the 3,000 demon soldiers. They were instantly enraged. "Bastard, who are you? How dare you go against my race? You're alone, and you dare to be so presumptuous in front of my race's army. Aren't you afraid of death? Lad, I don't care who you are. Hand over the 3,000 people immediately. Otherwise, I'll tear you into pieces." Quite a few oceanic species god kings scolded and cursed. Many oceanic species warriors laughed out loud and joined in the jeering and cursing. The flying dragon special forces stood beside Ji Tianxing. Even though the two of them were facing 30,000 sea race soldiers, their hearts were calm. He didn't know why, but with Ji Tianxing present, he felt incomparably safe. Ji Tianxing didn't waste time talking nonsense with the sea race god kings. He extended his right hand and summoned the sword of burial of heaven. His entire body was bursting with killing intent. In the next moment, he held the sword of burial of heaven and pointed it at the sky. He shouted, "Sword rain!" In an instant, the stars in the void outside the region flickered. Tens of thousands of meteors lit up in the sky. About 60,000 dazzling meteors gathered to form a meteor shower that covered the sky. They fell from the sky. The sea within 30,000 miles was covered. Before the meteor shower landed, the sea race army was already enduring a terrifying suppression. Instantly, the sea within 30,000 miles sank and was suppressed into a whirlpool. The 30,000 sea race army felt as if they were in a quagmire. They couldn't move an inch. The divine power in their bodies also became sluggish and solidified. The flying dragon special forces looked at the sky and saw that the meteors were 60,000 starry swords. Every starry sword was 10,000 feet long. They released a power and aura that could destroy everything. He could deeply feel the terrifying power of the starry sword rain. It made him feel reverence and fear from the bottom of his heart. If he wasn't standing beside Ji Tianxing and was confident that the starry sword rain wouldn't hurt him, he would have fled long ago. After all, he didn't have the slightest confidence that he could survive the bombardment of 10,000 starry swords. It was obvious that the fate of the 30,000 sea race army was sealed. Boom, boom, boom. Following a series of earth-shattering noises, the starry sword rain that covered the sky poured down. It covered 30,000 miles and hit countless sea race soldiers. Those arrogant, overbearing, and ferocious oceanic clansmen were extremely weak before the stellar sword, and they were instantly blasted into pieces, causing a monstrous rain of blood to spray out. Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 3872. Long Xiang stood beside Ji Tianxing and stared at the scene with his eyes wide open. There was no way that the starry giant sword would be able to reach within 1,000 feet of them. On the surface of the sea in all directions, countless sea race soldiers were blasted into pieces, turning into a rain of blood that scattered in the sea. After the starry giant sword killed the sea tribe soldiers, it slammed into the sea and created huge waves that were thousands of feet tall. The sea was in complete chaos and turned into a world of silver sword light. The sky was filled with blood. The deafening explosion completely covered the miserable cries of the sea tribe soldiers as they were blasted to death. Long Xiang watched this scene with his eyes wide open. He watched as countless members of the sea tribe were smashed into pieces. Fresh blood spurted before his eyes. His heart was already numb from the shock. He never dared to imagine that there would be someone who could fight against 10,000 alone. There was actually such an expert in the world who could kill 20,000 Sea Tribe soldiers in one move and make them unable to retaliate at all. This should not exist in reality. It should be an invincible divine king in fantasy. Long Xiang was very sure that neither the Imperial Tutor nor the Dragon Emperor had such terrifying means. So, this is the true strength of a divine king, as expected of the divine king who could defeat the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor and control the Stellar Source continent. Long Xiang exclaimed his heart. His reverence for Ji Tianxing had also reached the peak. For a divine king like Senior Long Tian, it is already a great fortune to be saved by him once. Twice when I was in a desperate situation and was about to lose my life, I was saved by him both times. I am really lucky. Such heaven-defying luck. If I tell others about it, they will be jealous to death. Long Xiang looked at the sky, full of sword light and blood in a daze. These thoughts flashed past his mind, and he felt rather emotional. After a while, the starry giant sword fell into the sea and gradually disappeared. The heaven and earth calmed down. Only the sea was still filled with huge waves. Out of the 30,000 Sea Tribe soldiers, 20,000 had been killed by the starry giant sword and turned into pieces that fell into the sea. Even the seabirds that covered the sky had been slaughtered by tens of thousands of them, becoming sparse in numbers. The surviving 10,000 Sea Tribe soldiers were all scared out of their wits. They were extremely fearful and uneasy. There was no need for the Sea Tribe's generals and divine kings to give orders. They had already retreated in panic, turning around and fleeing into the depths of the sea. This time, Ji Tianxing was no longer so merciful. With the sword of burial of heaven in hand, he began to chase after the sea folk generals. He could ignore the ordinary soldiers and sea beasts of the Sea Clan. However, Shi Yin wouldn't let the Sea Tribe's King God Realm experts off. He wouldn't give them a chance to take revenge. Heavenly Dragon Palm, Daylight Sword, Heavenly Dragon World Slash, Space-Time Blade. Ji Tianxing's figure teleported in the night sky. No one could escape his pursuit. His left hand continued to release divine abilities and ultimate skills, while his right hand brandished his sword and used sword arts. It could be said that he was attacking from both sides and going on a killing spree. Those low-level god kings and mid-level god kings of the sea creatures were no match for him. In just a short moment, they were all chopped up into pieces. In a short 30 breaths of time, the 14 sea race god kings were all killed by him. The broken corpses of the sea race god kings were scattered in the sea. However, Ji Tianxing waved his hand and shot out rays of golden light, collecting their interspatial rings and godhead fragments. After doing all this, he returned to the center of the battlefield and appeared in front of Long Xiang. At this moment, the sea region finally calmed down. Long Xiang was still in shock. His face was filled with astonishment. Swish! Ji Tianxing returned to him and put away the sword of burial of heaven. He frowned and asked, "Why are you in a daze? Didn't you want to explain to me?" "Oh, yes. Long Xiang came back to his senses and quickly nodded. "Senior Long Tian, please don't blame me. Just now you chased after those sea race god kings like you were chopping vegetables." I was stunned. Long Xiang calmed himself down and started to explain the cause of the incident. After 100 breaths of time, he finished telling Ji Tianxing what had happened. Then he bowed to Ji Tianxing and said solemnly, "Senior Long Tian, luckily you acted in time and saved us. Otherwise, I and more than 3,000 soldiers will all be buried here. We will all be annihilated." Before General Miu died, he said that no matter what, I have to survive and go back to expose the truth to avenge him and his soldiers. Ji Tianxing was not surprised by this. He asked calmly, "So, you are sure that the Imperial Tutor colluded with the Oceanic Trench Tribe to set a trap for you?" Long Xiang nodded and said with certainty, "The sea race will never be able to guess the battle plan that General Muyu and I discussed. Only the Imperial Tutor and the other 4 generals knew about it. Other than the Imperial Tutor, I can't think of anyone else who would leak the battle plan to get us killed. Only he would have the guts to use such a method to get rid of his enemies." Ji Tianxing frowned and thought for a moment. He analyzed and said, If the imperial tutor colluded with the oceanic trench tribe, it must not have happened recently. If this conclusion is true, it means that they have been colluding for a long time. We can even make a bold guess that the oceanic trench tribe's frequent attacks on the three southeastern regions for the past 10 years might be related to the imperial tutor. Long Xiang did not understand and asked curiously, what is the imperial tutor's motive for doing this? What benefits can he gain from this? The corners of Ji Tianxing's mouth curled up into a sneer, and he said, if the heavenly dragon continent is always safe and sound, how can he show his status and accumulate his forces? By colluding with the oceanic trench tribe and letting them attack the borders, not only can he gradually gain power, he can also benefit from it and use the oceanic trench tribe to get rid of his enemies. Hearing this, Long Xiang suddenly understood and his eyes widened. I see. Senior Long Tian is wise. I am stupid. Long Xiang understood the imperial tutor's motive and gritted his teeth in anger. He could not help but curse. If that's the case, the imperial tutor is really ambitious. In order to achieve his goal, he will do anything. He is really cruel, vicious, and extremely evil. Why go back this time? I will definitely reprimand the Dragon Emperor. Even if I have to fight with the imperial tutor, I will expose his evil face. Ji Tianxing patted his shoulder and comforted him. Don't be anxious. These are only our guesses and deductions. Since the imperial tutor is colluding with the oceanic trench tribe, they must have communicated with each other. Let me look for it. Therefore, he took out the space rings of the oceanic trench tribe's deity kings and used his divine sense to search through them. Long Xiang was full of anticipation and looked at him quietly. About an hour later, Ji Tianxing rummaged through 10 interspatial rings and found a few communication jade slips among them. These few specially made communication jade slips were all short and obscure messages. But these were all messages sent by the imperial tutor. These were the ironclad evidence of the imperial tutor colluding with the oceanic trench tribe. Ji Tianxing handed a few communication jade slips to Long Xiang, then said with a serious tone, the truth has been revealed, and these few jade slips are the evidence of your crime. You have to think carefully about how to use these evidence to make North Sea decide to get rid of the imperial tutor. Chapter 3873. Hearing Ji Tianxing's words, Long Xiang was stunned for a moment. Senior Long Tian, are you not coming back with me to expose the imperial tutor? In his opinion, now that he had evidence of the imperial tutor's crimes, it was the best time to expose and eliminate the imperial tutor. The imperial tutor had persecuted Long Tian. He would definitely go back to take revenge. Ji Tianxing shook his head and said calmly, since I've already left the heavenly dragon continent, why would I go back? This matter needs to be handled by you. If I go back, I'm afraid it will backfire. Moreover, this is the heavenly dragon divine palace's matter. What does it have to do with me? Previously, he had been touring the Taishan cave heaven for half a month. While admiring the scenery, he had also thought through some problems. Since he had decided to leave the heavenly dragon continent and did not kill the imperial tutor, it meant that he did not want to meddle in other people's business. What he did today was to save Long Xiang and the 3,000 soldiers. He wanted to help Long Xiang and the deceased General Muyu to find out the truth. Long Xiang's eyes dimmed, and his expression became serious. He smiled bitterly and said, if Senior does not come with me, then this mission will be too difficult. He felt great pressure and felt that this matter was not going to be easy. He had to think about it carefully. Ji Tianxing smiled and encouraged him. You are not even afraid of death. Why would you be afraid of falling out with the imperial tutor? Think about General Muyu and the 10,000 soldiers who died unjustly. Shouldn't you seek justice for them? Long Xiang's body trembled. The scenes of the soldiers dying and the words of General Muyu appeared in his mind. He felt a great sense of responsibility, and his heart became firm. After a short moment, he took a deep breath and bowed to Ji Tianxing. Thank you for your teachings, Senior. I'll definitely do my best. Even if I have to bet my life, I'll still complete this matter. Not only for the peace of the heavenly palace and the people of the continent, but also for my dead comrades and comrades. Ji Tianxing waved his hand and shot out a white light. 5 divine warships and close to 100 soldiers were released from the primordial chaos bell. The divine warships and soldiers stood in the air above the sea, looking around. Seeing that the surroundings had returned to normal, they knew that the battle was over. The crimson seawater and the countless corpses that were slowly sinking into the sea showed that the Sea Tribe's army had suffered heavy casualties. Everyone guessed the result, and they were all inexplicably shocked. Their reverence for Ji Tianxing increased. Ji Tianxing looked at Long Xiang and warned, "You were saved by this king twice, but you can't be so lucky all the time. After this incident, I hope you can learn a lesson and not be so straightforward and impulsive. There's only hope if you're alive. If you're dead, everything is over." After he finished speaking, he didn't stay any longer. He stepped into the sky and flew toward the south. More than 3,000 soldiers walked out of the divine warship and bowed to Ji Tianxing's back with the Flying Dragon Special Forces. They watched as he left. When his figure disappeared into the darkness, everyone returned to the divine ship and steered it towards the north. Ji Tianxing returned to the Sword of Burial of Heaven and entered the distorted space-time. He sat cross-legged under the blood-flame sacred tree. He wasn't in a hurry to cultivate. He first meditated for 2 days. Through the collusion between the Imperial Tutor and the Sea Tribe, he had already seen the Imperial Tutor's wild ambition. He also guessed the Imperial Tutor's goal and plan. He wanted to strengthen himself and weaken Dark North's status and prestige. In the end, he would replace Dark North and seize the throne of the Dragon Emperor. However, Dark North was protecting the Imperial Tutor in every possible way. He didn't want to care anymore. He believed that Long Xiang would try his best to investigate the truth and report it to Dark North. He would urge Dark North to make a decision. As long as Dark North didn't want to die, he would definitely cut his losses and eliminate the Imperial Tutor in time. If Dark North avoided the Imperial Tutor as usual and continued to indulge the Imperial Tutor, then he would only have himself to blame if he was replaced or even killed by the Imperial Tutor. In any case, Ji Tianxing had already done what he needed to do. The rest was up to Dark North to decide. Thinking of this, Ji Tianxing temporarily threw the news about Dark North and the Imperial Tutor to the back of his mind. He began to recall the customs of the Red Dragon continent, as well as the powerful people and the power structure. Strictly speaking, other than his master, the Red Dragon Emperor, he was closest to the Red Dragon Emperor. After all, the Red Dragon Emperor was the youngest of the 5 Dragon Emperors. He was the closest to him back then. Although they didn't meet many times, the Red Dragon Emperor had always treated him like a brother. The two of them drank and chatted many times. Their relationship was closer than his relationship with the Black Dragon Emperor. I wonder how the Red Dragon Emperor is now after more than 1,000 years. Recalling the power structure of the Red Dragon continent, Ji Tianxing was a little worried. After all, the Red Dragon Emperor had only become the Dragon Emperor 1,500 years ago with the support of the Heaven Dragon Emperor. At that time, Kenshin had just ascended to the Dragon Realm and had just become the disciple of the Heaven Dragon Emperor. He was not qualified to participate in that matter. However, he later found out that the situation on the Red Dragon continent was very complicated. The Red Dragon Emperor was the most powerful dragon on the continent. However, he was only 5,000 years old. His seniority and status were not high enough. He also did not have any power. On that continent, there were 2 peak divine kings. Their status, seniority, and power were far superior to the Red Dragon Emperor. One of the peak divine kings was clan leader Lu Wu, who had lived for nearly 30,000 years. His age and seniority were similar to that of the Heaven Dragon Emperor. He was also very powerful. The Lu Wu clan was one of the 7 great demon clans. They had nearly 10,000 descendants and many divine kings in the clan. They occupied the most fertile grotto heaven and had abundant cultivation resources. Therefore, their power continued to grow and the clan produced many elites. The other peak divine king was the Golden Crow clan leader who was more than 24,000 years old. His age and seniority were lower than that of the Heaven Dragon Emperor, clan leader Lu Wu, and the Black Dragon Emperor. However, he was also a peak divine king who had been famous for thousands of years. He controlled the entire Golden Crow clan and occupied a grotto heaven. The number of descendants of the Golden Crow clan was decreasing. There were only about 4,000 of them. However, there were many divine kings in the Golden Crow clan. Their fighting power was outstanding, and they were a powerful force. At that time, the bloodlines of the 4 great dragon clans had withered. They were few in number, and each had their own way of governing. They were not united. In the process of fighting for the position of Dragon Emperor, the 4 great dragon clans kept discussing, negotiating, and working together. However, they could not reach an agreement. Although the Red Dragon Emperor was a peak divine king, he was too young. His seniority was too low, and he did not have much power. The Luwu clan and the Golden Crow clan were closing in. They controlled most of the territories and were very powerful. Most of the demon clans thought that the new overlord would be either the Golden Crow clan leader or clan leader Luwu. The Dragon clan definitely had no hope. However, no one expected the weakest Red Dragon Emperor to ask for help from the Dragon Emperors of the other continents. At that time, the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor ignored him. The Sacred Dragon Emperor also remained neutral. Only the Heaven Dragon Emperor and the Black Dragon Emperor expressed their support for the Red Dragon Emperor. Later, the Heaven Dragon Emperor led his trusted subordinates and personally came to the Red Dragon continent to suppress the chaos. Under his supervision, the 3 great peak divine kings carried out a competition, fairly contending for the position of overlord. End of chapter. Chapter 3874. Originally, the Golden Crow tribe and Luwu tribe controlled the situation and occupied 70% of the Crimson Dragon continent. The Dragon tribe was still at odds with each other and had no leader. They had no right to fight for supremacy. However, the Sky Dragon Emperor came personally to consolidate the power of the Dragon tribe and made the Crimson Dragon Emperor the leader. Then he used force to suppress the Golden Crow tribe and Luwu tribe, forcing the 3 forces to sit down and negotiate. The negotiation was led by the Sky Dragon Emperor and the Dragon tribe. The Sky Dragon Emperor proposed a fair competition between the 3 forces for the position of overlord. Fortunately, the Sky Dragon Emperor managed the situation and gave the Dragon tribe a fair chance to compete. Otherwise, the Dragon tribe would not even have the chance to compete. The Golden Crow tribe leader and Luwu tribe leader could not resist and could only accept the Sky Dragon Emperor's conditions. In their minds, even if they gave up the most advantageous subordinate forces, they would still be able to defeat the Crimson Dragon Emperor. After all, the 3 of them were peak divine kings, and the Crimson Dragon Emperor was the youngest and the weakest. But no one had expected that the Golden Crow Patriarch and Patriarch Luwu would be defeated by the Crimson Dragon Emperor's sword. The young Dragon Emperor, who was ignored and looked down upon, was unbelievably powerful. After the Golden Crow tribe leader and Luwu tribe leader were defeated, they almost flipped the table. They wanted to tear up the agreement of the negotiation and refused to accept the result of the duel and continue to use war to solve the problem. However, the Black Dragon Emperor appeared at the right time and joined forces with the Sky Dragon Emperor to suppress the situation. The Golden Crow tribe leader and Luwu tribe leader only had 2 choices. They could either accept the Crimson Dragon Emperor's position as overlord or be annihilated by the 3 Dragon Emperors. In desperation, they could only choose to submit and return to their respective grotto heavens. From then on, the Crimson Dragon Emperor officially became the overlord and began to control the Crimson Dragon continent. Of course, the process was not easy. In fact, it was very difficult. Although he was the Crimson Dragon Emperor in name, the Golden Crow tribe and Luwu tribe were also forced to hand over large areas under the coercion of the 2 Dragon Emperors. However, only a third of the 100 domains on the Crimson Dragon continent had truly submitted to him. The remaining 60 to 70% of the territories were either feigning civility or staunch supporters of the Golden Crow tribe and Luwu tribe. Therefore, the Red Dragon Emperor had a long way to go if he wanted to control almost 100 regions and truly rule over the entire continent. Heavenly Dragon Emperor and Black Dragon Emperor could help him take over the throne, but they could not always help him. When he ascended to the throne of the Dragon Emperor and the war ended, he would have to do the rest himself. Ji Tianxing recalled the past events of the Crimson Dragon continent and murmured worriedly, "It's been more than 1,000 years. I wonder if the Crimson Dragon Emperor has complete control over that continent." In the past, when his master was still alive, his power was so great that Patriarch Lu Wu and the Golden Crow Patriarch did not dare to act recklessly. But after Master went missing, I believe that with their ambition and power, they wouldn't be willing to lie low, right? It was a pity that when he was in the Star Source continent, he did not hear any news about the Crimson Dragon continent. After arriving at the Heavenly Dragon continent, he stayed in the Taishian Cave Heaven for a very short time, and there was no news of the Red Dragon Emperor. If the situation on the Crimson Dragon continent changes, such as the Golden Crow and clan leader Lu Wu seizing the position of Dragon Emperor, the news will definitely spread throughout the Dragon Realm. Since I didn't receive any news and Ophiuchus didn't mention these things, then the Red Dragon Emperor should be fine. Thinking of this, Ji Tianxing felt much more at ease. No matter what, I'll look for him when I arrive at the Crimson Dragon continent and see what's going on. After making up his mind, he stopped thinking about this matter and started to cultivate. The journey was long, and he still had to spend 4 years in the distorted space-time before he cultivated the Heaven Punishment Divine technique and steadily increased his power. Time passed quietly. Unknowingly, 3 years had passed. In these 3 years, Ji Tianxing had consumed countless godstones and cultivation resources, and his power had increased by 30%. He was one step closer to the 9th level of the Divine King realm. 21 days had passed in the outside world. The Sword of Burial of Heaven had passed through the vast celestial sea and arrived at the northern part of the Crimson Dragon continent. The Crimson Dragon continent's customs were different from those of the Heavenly Dragon continent and the Star Source continent. This continent was located at the southernmost part of the Dragon realm, and the temperature was the warmest and most humid. Once he entered the Crimson Dragon continent, he could see endless mountains and primeval forests. Lush ancient trees that were hundreds of feet tall formed a dark green ocean. Birds flew in flocks in the sky, and beasts could be seen everywhere in the forest. Even the spirit chi and divine power between heaven and earth were more abundant than those of other continents. In the boundless mountains and jungles, one could often see those majestic, ancient cities where millions of demon clan people lived. Their lives were rich, plain, and peaceful. If there were no wars and disasters, the Crimson Dragon continent would be the most suitable place to live and cultivate. However, Ji Tianxing flew all the way south and saw many regions, empires, and kingdoms. He knew very well that peace and tranquility were only a few, and they were only superficial. At this moment, the Crimson Dragon continent still had an undercurrent and oppressive feeling that a storm was coming. Although he still did not know how the power structure of the Crimson Dragon continent was divided, he already had a premonition that the Crimson Dragon continent was not peaceful recently, and something big might happen. With such doubts and worries, he told the Sword of Burial of Heaven, "Hurry up and go to the Divine Fire Grotto in the Crimson Dragon Domain." The Crimson Dragon Domain was in the center of the Crimson Dragon continent, and it was closer to the south. The Divine Fire Grotto was one of the 36 grotto heavens in the Dragon Realm, and it was also a blessed place for cultivation. At the same time, it was also the abode where the Crimson Dragon Emperor lived. The Sword of Burial of Heaven had a deep understanding of him, and he understood his meaning and worries when he heard this sentence. While speeding up, the Sword of Burial of Heaven did not forget to persuade him. "You don't have to worry too much. You have to believe in the Crimson Dragon Emperor's ability." Ji Tianxing was silent for a moment, then nodded and said, "Yes. The Crimson Dragon Emperor may be young, but he is praised by Master as the most outstanding genius of the dragon race in the past 20,000 years. The person Master values and cares about the most is me, followed by the Crimson Dragon Emperor. As for Dark North, in Master's heart, he might be 4th or 5th. Back then, the Crimson Dragon Emperor was able to defeat clan leader Lu Wu and the Golden Crow clan under the guidance of Master and the Black Dragon Emperor. Now he should be even stronger, and Lu Wu and the Golden Crow clan should not be a threat to him. The Sword of Burial of Heaven did not say anything else, and continued to speed up like an aurora cutting through the sky. Tianxing also calmed down and continued to cultivate. The sun and moon rose and set, and day and night alternated. Day after day passed. The sword of burial of heaven crossed one region after another, and gradually approached the Crimson Dragon domain in the center of the Crimson Dragon continent. The closer they got to the Crimson Dragon domain, the more the burial of heaven observed the situation in each region, and the more tense it became. At least, many regions around the Crimson Dragon domain were in a state of tension. The sword of burial of heaven could also feel an aura of war pervading this continent. Chapter 3875. Another 10 days passed. That evening, the sword of burial of heaven finally arrived at the Red Dragon region. It was not far from the Divine Flame Grotto. Tianxing received the reminder from the burial of heaven and ended his closed-door cultivation. He was ready to negotiate with the people from the Divine Flame Grotto. It was also at this moment that he suddenly received a transmission jade slip. This message came from the Heavenly Dragon continent in the north. It was from Long Xiang. Tianxing took the jade slip. He did not need to read the contents to know that Long Xiang wanted to report the results to him. There were only two outcomes. First, North Sea continued to protect the imperial tutor and ignore the evidence provided by Long Xiang. Second, North Sea felt that the situation was serious and his position was threatened. He finally mustered up the courage to kill the imperial tutor. It has been a month since I separated from Long Xiang. It would take at least a month for him to rush back to the grand mystery grotto from the depths of the sky sea. How could there be results so quickly? Tianxing frowned and thought for a while. He felt that something was wrong and used his divine sense to read the contents of the jade slip. Suddenly, Long Xiang's deep and powerful voice rang out in his mind. Long Xiang's voice was filled with excitement. Senior Long Tian, Long Xiang, General Muyu, and 15,000 soldiers express our sincere gratitude to you. In the court meeting just now, more than 30 generals, commanders, and territorial lords joined forces to remonstrate. His Majesty the Dragon Emperor finally made up his mind and announced the imperial tutor's crimes. He wants to completely eliminate the imperial tutor. Once this news was out, countless soldiers were in high spirits. Their blood boiled as they rejoiced and celebrated together. It was probably because Long Xiang was too emotional and excited that he announced the results right from the start. Afterwards, he reported everything that had happened to Tianxing. It turned out that after he separated from Tianxing, he brought more than 3,000 soldiers and rushed back to the Changkong region as quickly as possible. It was too slow to bring the soldiers back to the Grand Mystery Grotto. Therefore, he ordered the soldiers to stay in the Changkong region to recuperate and wait for news and orders. He only brought 2 lieutenants with him. Using the teleportation formations of various regions, he rushed back to the Grand Mystery Cave Heaven as quickly as possible. After returning to Taishan Cave Heaven, he didn't have time to treat his injuries. He secretly contacted all the generals who had a grudge against the imperial tutor. After learning about the imperial tutor's conspiracy and crimes, everyone was outraged and filled with righteous indignation. They agreed with Flying Dragon Special Forces' decision. Even if they had to sacrifice their lives, they had to use this opportunity to defeat the imperial tutor. Thus, everyone rushed back to the Great Mystery Cave Heaven within 8 days and jointly presented themselves to the Dragon Emperor Biming. In the study of the Dragon Emperor, they presented all the evidence they had and remonstrated the imperial tutor to Dark North. Dark North didn't care too much about the evidence of the imperial tutor's corruption, the elimination of dissidents, and the secret cultivation of forces. However, when Dark North saw the imperial tutor colluding with the sea race, and combined with the imperial tutor's actions over the past few hundred years, he understood the imperial tutor's conspiracy and goal. Just like the advice of the 30 generals, commanders, and region lords, the imperial tutor wanted to take over Dark North and gradually seize power. He wanted to destroy Dark North's prestige and make him lose the people's hearts. When Dark North lost all the people's hearts and had no loyal subjects, it would be the best time to kill Dark North, eliminate evil for the people, and seize the throne of the Dragon Emperor. At that time, No one would support and protect Dark North. The heavenly dragon divine palace and the hundreds of millions of people on the continent would even think that Dark North deserved to be punished and that even 100 deaths wouldn't be enough to atone for his crimes. And the imperial tutor would become the spiritual leader of eliminating evil for the people. Coupled with the fact that he had full control of the power, it would be logical for him to succeed the throne of the Dragon Emperor. This was the imperial tutor's conspiracy and plan. Moreover, when the heavenly Dragon Emperor disappeared and the heavenly Dragon continent was without a leader, he had already begun to execute his plan. At that time, Dark North was the North Sea Dragon King Palace Lord. As Dark North's uncle, he had no right to seize the throne of the Dragon Emperor. In comparison, Dark North's bloodline and identity were more advantageous, and his prestige was also higher. Therefore, the imperial tutor did his best to encourage Dark North to seize the throne of the Dragon Emperor. He also worked hard for Dark North and came up with plans for him. After Dark North seized the throne of the Dragon Emperor, the imperial tutor began to implement his plan to gradually seize power and eliminate dissidents. In order to further undermine Dark North's prestige and arouse the anger of the people, the imperial tutor secretly used many methods. Not only did he use Dark North's name to wantonly amass wealth, cultivate power, and harm the people of various regions, he also ordered people to spread rumors, slander, and attack Dark North. Even colluding with the Sea Tribe was for personal gain, to arouse the anger of the people and to highlight Dark North's incompetence. In short, the imperial tutor was ambitious. In order to seize the throne of the Dragon Emperor, he schemed and plotted for thousands of years. Now that the truth had been revealed, Dark North was filled with grief and resentment, and he was furious. He could tolerate the imperial tutor's high position, arrogance, and arrogance. He could tolerate the imperial tutor's personal gain and eliminate dissidents. In his opinion, the imperial tutor was his uncle. He helped him solve his problems and worked hard for him. Even if he made some mistakes, it would not hurt him. However, what he could not tolerate was the imperial tutor's ambition. He schemed and plotted to seize the throne of the Dragon Emperor and even wanted to ruin his reputation. This was Dark North's bottom line. Therefore, he decided not to tolerate and compromise anymore. He recalled what Ji Tianqing had said at that time, and finally made up his mind to eliminate the imperial preceptor. That night in the study, Dark North decided to hold a court meeting. He gathered hundreds of generals, commanders, and region leaders and announced his decision in front of everyone. The Flying Dragon Special Forces and more than 30 generals also had to cooperate with him. Therefore, in today's court meeting, more than 30 generals, led by the Flying Dragon Special Forces, remonstrated with death in the main hall. If Dark North did not eliminate the imperial tutor, they would commit suicide in front of the main hall. Once the remonstrance was announced, the hundreds of officials in the court meeting were shocked and started discussing. Dark North put on a compassionate attitude. He reluctantly announced the imperial tutor's crimes and issued an edict to eliminate the imperial tutor and his henchmen. After reading the edict, Dark North knelt down in front of the hundreds of millions of people and apologized with tears in his eyes. He felt guilty and blamed himself. After this, the hundreds of officials were grateful and cheered. Everyone unanimously believed that Dark North was still a benevolent emperor who loved the people. However, he was too benevolent and magnanimous. The evil imperial tutor was too treacherous. He was deceived for hundreds of years and caused the people to suffer. Now that the Dragon Emperor had come to his senses and apologized to the people, it was a great thing for them. As long as the evil imperial tutor was eliminated, the heavenly Dragon Divine Palace will be able to regain its peace. The hundreds of millions of people in the heavenly Dragon Continent would also be able to escape from the abyss of suffering. After the court meeting ended, the hundreds of officials began to carry out the orders. At the same time, the edict issued by the Dragon Emperor, Dark North, was quickly sent to the 100 territories and announced to the world. Without a doubt, the imperial tutor would be pinned on the pillar of shame and unable to recover. Although he was far away in the 3 southeastern regions, he would definitely not surrender and admit his crimes. He would most likely flee and secretly gather his trusted subordinates to deal with the Dragon Emperor in North Sea. However, this was not important. He was destined to have a tragic ending. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 3876. After reading Long Xiang's message, Ji Tianxing kept his communication jade scroll. He did not intend to reply to Long Xiang's message, nor did he want to care about the heavenly dragon continent. In response to Dark North's reaction and actions, the corners of his mouth curled up into a sneer as he muttered a few words in a low voice. In the past, no matter how evil the Imperial Tutor was, he was only hurting others, not you. Only when the Imperial Tutor threatened your life and throne would you be determined to get rid of him. Ha ha, just as I expected. Diligent and caring for the people, you still love yourself the most. The Imperial Tutor thought he was cunning and treacherous, but compared to you, he is far from being shrewd. For the past few hundred years, the Imperial Tutor had been acting and scheming in the dark. He thought that he was smart enough to play around with the honest Dark North. But in reality, wasn't Dark North also acting and using him, playing him in the palm of his hand? In the end, Dark North could get rid of him legitimately. He would not have to bear the infamy, but would also gain the reputation of being righteous and caring for the people. It could be expected that after this incident, all the grievances and crimes of the people of the Heavenly Dragon Continent would be pinned on the Imperial Tutor. And the Dragon Emperor Dark North would not only be able to wash away his infamy, but also gain a good reputation. His reputation would also reach unprecedented heights. In the end, the battle between uncle and nephew was won by Dark North. The Divine Fire Grotto Heaven was in the center of the Red Dragon region. Within a radius of 1,000,000 miles, there were majestic mountains and primeval forests. The scenery was magnificent and magnificent. In the depths of the endless mountains, there was a bottomless abyss with a radius of 10,000 miles. The entrance of the abyss was covered by endless divine fire. It burned fiercely and would never be extinguished. Only after entering the abyss and stepping through the endless divine fire could one enter the Divine Fire Grotto Heaven. The other grotto heavens were mostly independent of the dragon realm, suspended in the void. Through the spatial barrier of the grotto heaven, one could see the starry sky. And this Divine Fire Grotto Heaven was actually deep in the Earth's core of the dragon realm. Although it was also an alternate dimension, it was different from the dragon realm and could only be entered through a great formation. However, it was in the depths of the Earth's core, floating in the boundless sea of magma. Other than the Red Dragon Emperor and a few divine kings, no one knew the exact location of the Divine Fire Grotto. No one could enter the Earth's core and find it in the sea of magma. Chua. When night fell, the sword of burial of heaven descended from the sky and landed in the air above the abyss in the mountains. The surging five-colored divine flames covered the abyss in a radius of thousands of kilometers, forming a natural barrier. This abyss had become a forbidden area. Even if there were no guards guarding it, no one dared to approach it. As for those birds and beasts, even if they had divine Lord Realm strength, they also did not dare to rashly barge in. After all, only godly king powerhouses could withstand the five-color divine fire that enveloped the entire abyss. Any living being below the divine king realm would be burned to ashes once they touched it. More than 1,000 years ago, Kenshin Ryushin had followed the heavenly dragon emperor to the divine flame grotto once. He had some understanding of the situation in the divine flame wonderland. Chua. With a flash of white light, Ji Tianxing in a snow-white robe appeared in the air above the abyss. He put away the sword of burial of heaven and stepped into the abyss. The surging five-color divine fire immediately drowned his figure. However, there was a layer of hazy golden light on the surface of his body that protected him. The five-color divine fire could not harm him. He passed through the five-color divine fire that was about 1,000 miles thick and entered the depths of the abyss. He came to a huge white door of light. This white door of light was the entrance to the divine flame grotto. It was protected by an upper-grade king realm divine array. A few hundred miles above the door of light was the surging five-colored divine fire. However, there was not a single divine fire around the door of light. The surrounding light was also a little dim. There were more than 100 guards around the door of light. Among them, the 4 leaders were all divine kings. Seeing Ji Tianxing's arrival, the guards were immediately on alert. They held their swords in their hands and were ready to attack. 2 divine king realm guards approached Ji Tianxing cautiously and stopped him. Please tell us your name. What business do you have in the divine flame grotto? Ji Tianxing stared at the 2 commanders for a moment and suddenly revealed a trace of smile. If I'm not mistaken, your names are Long Xianfeng and Long Xinyan. Both of you are disciples of the Red Dragon tribe and a pair of brothers. I didn't expect that after more than 1,000 years, your strength had only increased by 1 level. Why are you still guarding the door? The 2 guards in golden armor were of the Red Dragon tribe bloodline. They looked very similar in terms of body size. Both of them had reached the 6th level of the Divine King realm. They could rule over a region in the Dragon realm. However, after more than 1,000 years, they were still guarding the door. This surprised Ji Tianxing. Long Xianfeng and Long Xinyan frowned at the same time. They looked at Ji Tianxing even more cautiously and asked, "Who are you? How do you know us? Are you saying that you have known us for more than 1,000 years?" Seeing their reactions, Ji Tianxing suddenly guessed the reason and couldn't help but chuckle. No wonder Long Yin didn't promote you and still asked you to guard the door. He can only rest assured if you 2 guard the door so carefully. Billions of people in the Red Dragon continent only knew the name of the Red Dragon Emperor, but not his real name. He was Long Yin. Long Xianfeng and Long Xuanyan's faces changed immediately. They looked at Ji Tianxing with a strange look. Since Ji Tianxing dared to call the Red Dragon Emperor by his name and showed no malice, he was most likely a friend of the Red Dragon Emperor. "Sir, we don't mean to offend you, but please tell us your name and purpose so that we can pass the message." Long Xianfeng kept his divine saber and cupped his fists at Ji Tianxing as he said respectfully. Ji Tianxing stopped teasing them and said with a smile, "Tell Long Yin that Long Tian is here. Ask him to prepare some good wine." Long Tian, Long Xianfeng, and Long Xuanyan's eyes widened when they heard the name. They were stunned. After a while, the 2 brothers came back to their senses. They suddenly came to a realization and revealed a friendly smile. "No wonder I thought you looked familiar, but I couldn't remember. It's young Master Long Tian." "Young Master Long, you've only been here once, but you remembered our names. What an honor." As the Red Dragon Emperor's trusted subordinates, the brothers knew Long Tian and knew about the friendship between Long Tian and the Red Dragon Emperor. Therefore, the 2 of them no longer had any doubts. They put away their Kenshin weapons and bowed to Ji Tianxing. Long Xianfeng chatted with Ji Tianxing. Long Xinyan took out his communication jade slip and reported the news to the Red Dragon Emperor. Although the 2 of them were sure of Long Tian's identity, they did not dare to make the decision to let Long Tian into the Divine Fire Cave. They had no choice. The brothers had always been cautious. Not long after, Long Xinyan received a message from the Red Dragon Emperor. There was only 1 sentence in the message, but the tone was full of surprise and excitement. "Long Tian is here. Let him in. Don't delay." End of chapter. Chapter 3877. After receiving the Red Dragon Emperor's order, the Feng and Yun brothers no longer had any doubts and quickly opened the entrance. Long Xianfeng continued to guard the entrance while Long Xinyan personally led Ji Tianxing into the Divine Fire Cave. Swoosh! The 2 of them stepped through the blazing white light gate and entered a magnificent alternate dimension. The Divine Fire Cave was like a golden light ball with a radius of 1,000,000 miles, floating in the boundless sea of lava. Through the golden spatial barrier, one could clearly see the slowly boiling, flowing lava and thousands of 5-colored divine flames. After more than 1,000 years, Ji Tianxing once again saw the sky made of lava and flames, and he was still stunned by the magnificent scene. The Red Dragon Emperor's Red Dragon Divine Palace was deep in the Divine Fire Cave, where the spirit veins gathered. Long Xinyan led Ji Tianxing to the Red Dragon Divine Palace, and they met many guards and demon generals on the way. Everyone stopped and bowed to Long Xianyun and Ji Tianxing. Seeing the guards and generals in an orderly manner, Ji Tianxing knew that the Red Dragon Emperor's management over the years was very effective. Even if the Red Dragon continent was really dangerous, it would not be a big problem. Along the way, Ji Tianxing looked at the ground that was like glass and jade and the beautiful sky that was constantly changing. He felt a little emotional. The Divine Fire Cave was still the same as before, but many changes had happened in the past 1,000 years. Even he was no longer the cold Kenshin Long Tian of the past. 2 hours later, Ji Tianxing and Long Xianyun arrived at the depths of the cave. In front of them was a mountain range that looked like crystal, glass, and red jade. Dozens of mountains stood proudly, shining with dazzling divine light. On top of each mountain peak, one could clearly see magnificent palaces, majestic mansions, and buildings. Every palace and mansion was guarded by guards in bright armor. There were guards patrolling the gates, roads, and the sky. This made the Red Dragon Divine Palace look majestic and dignified, but also a little more dignified and somber. Long Xianyun led Ji Tianxing over the mountains and flew to the peak in the middle. They landed outside the most solemn palace. The two of them landed and walked, with Long Xianyun leading the way. The guards at the gates and passageways let them pass without any obstruction. Young Master Long, the Dragon Emperor, is handling military affairs in the study. I will take you there. Logically speaking, an important guest like Ji Tianxing should be received by the Red Dragon Emperor in the guest reception hall. But the Red Dragon Emperor had been busy with government affairs and was basically always busy in the study. Long Xianyun was worried that Ji Tianxing would misunderstand, so he explained it to him. Ji Tianxing had guessed the reason, so he naturally wouldn't fuss over it and followed him into the depths of the Divine Palace. The Red Dragon Emperor was the Dragon Emperor's visit to the Dragon Emperor was the Red Dragon Emperor's visit. The Red Dragon Emperor's Dragon Emperor was the Dragon Emperor's Long Xianyun Divine Palace Long Xianyun stood outside the study and reported, "Your Majesty, the Dragon Emperor, I have brought young Master Long here. I will take my leave now." After bowing, Long Xianyun bade farewell to Ji Tianxing and left the palace. Ji Tianxing stepped into the study alone. He immediately saw a mountain of memorials on the table in the bright and spacious study. Amidst the mountain of memorials and letters, a young man of the dragon clan in a dark red dragon robe was writing at a fast speed with a grave expression on his face. Even though they had not seen each other for more than 1,000 years, the red-robed youth did not change much. He was still as handsome and noble as before. Hearing Ji Tianxing's footsteps, the red-robed youth immediately put down his writing brush and looked up at Ji Tianxing with a sincere and happy smile. "Long Tian, it's you. I didn't expect to see you again after more than 1,000 years. This is great." The red-robed young man excitedly stood up to greet Ji Tianxing. Without saying anything, he gave Ji Tianxing a bear hug. Ji Tianxing felt warmth in his heart when he saw that the red-robed youth was still as friendly as before, even though he had been the Dragon Emperor for more than 1,000 years. He smiled and said, "Long Yin, I haven't seen you for more than 1,000 years, but you haven't changed at all." The red-robed youth, Long Yin, was the Red Dragon Emperor. The two of them had not seen each other for a long time, so they naturally chatted and asked about each other's well-being. Long Yin put aside his work for the time being and brewed 2 cups of hot tea. He sat down with Ji Tianxing and talked about old times, asking about his experiences over the years. Ji Tianxing gave a simple explanation, saying that he had been cultivating in seclusion in the realm of the gods all these years and did not care about worldly affairs. That was why his strength had improved so much. After reminiscing for the time it took to brew a cup of tea, Long Yin suddenly recalled something. He stared at Ji Tianxing with sparkling eyes and asked, "Brother, I heard that something happened to the Star Source continent a year ago." Long Tian led the Myriad Demon Alliance to conquer the Xuanji Grotto Heaven, defeated the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor, and ruled the Star Source continent. "That Long Tian is you, right?" Ji Tianxing smiled and nodded. Long Yan's doubts were confirmed, and he laughed excitedly. He patted Ji Tianxing's shoulder and said, I knew it was you. Ha ha. Who else has this ability other than you? After laughing, he calmed down and asked doubtfully, "All right, you just took control of the Star Source continent, and it's a critical period now. You should be in the Xuanji Grotto Heaven and control the entire continent as soon as possible. Why are you here? Aren't you afraid that the remnants of the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor will take the opportunity to cause trouble?" Ji Tianxing smiled and said calmly, "If I told you that I have no interest in the Dragon Emperor's position and that I was forced to destroy the Xuanji Grotto Heaven, would you believe me?" Long Yin was stunned and looked at him strangely. After a while, Long Yin came back to his senses and patted his shoulder and gave him a thumbs up. "Brother, I haven't seen you for more than 1,000 years, and you've changed a lot. You've learned how to pretend? Well done. You're good at pretending." "I'm really not pretending." Ji Tianxing spread his hands helplessly. "Why don't you believe me?" Long Yin waved his hands and smiled bitterly. Okay, I believe you, okay? All right. What's your relationship with the leader of the Myriad Demon Alliance, Luo Ho? How did you subdue him?" When Long Yin received the news a year ago, he had suspected the identity of the Luo Ho Divine King and his relationship with Long Tian. Ji Tianxing replied, "Not only you, I think many people want to know the answer. I can tell you, but please keep it a secret." "Of course." Long Yin nodded quickly. "I promise I won't tell anyone. The Luo Ho Divine King is actually Ophiuchus." Ji Tianxing said calmly. "Ophiuchus? It's him. No wonder." Long Yin was suddenly enlightened. He felt shocked and incredulous. Since Ophiuchus was the leader of the Myriad Demon Alliance, it was not hard to understand why the Myriad Demon Alliance would listen to Long Tian. But Ophiuchus has reached the peak Divine King realm? This is unbelievable. Bookhouse Reading Website. Chapter 3878. If Ophiuchus heard what you said, he would definitely be depressed. Seeing Long Yin's expression of disbelief, Ji Tianxing chuckled. Cough, cough. Long Yin laughed awkwardly and explained, "I didn't mean to look down on him. I just found it very surprising. Don't tell him." Ji Tianxing smiled and didn't explain anything. The two of them knew each other's character very well and naturally knew that Ji Tianxing was just joking. After calming down, Long Yin analyzed, with Ophiuchus overseeing Xingyuan continent. With his meticulous nature, there's naturally no need to worry about the overall situation. It's no wonder that you can run around at this time. All right, why did you come to find me? It shouldn't be as simple as catching up, right? Ji Tianxing nodded and said in a low voice, "Indeed, I came to find you to find out if there's any news about my son." He briefly told him about Wuhan's disappearance and how he was rescued by a peak Divine King. After Long Yin heard it, he was a little depressed and worried. He shook his head and said, "Although I've been in Crimson Dragon Continent for the past few decades, I didn't know about this, and I've never seen Wuhan. However, I'll send people to investigate this matter and try to help you find your son." Ji Tianxing pointed at the table that was piled with memorials and asked, "If I'm not wrong, Crimson Dragon Continent isn't peaceful now, and you must be very busy. At this time, you don't have to waste people to help me investigate. You just have to think of a way to help me ask other peak Divine Kings, and I'll be very grateful." Other peak Divine Kings? Long Yin was stunned for a moment, and then revealed a bitter smile. Crimson Dragon Continent only has 3 peak Divine Kings. Other than me, there's only clan leader Lu Wu and clan leader Golden Crow left. Those 2 fellows can't wait to kill me now. If I ask them, I'll definitely not get any results. Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows. When Master was still alive, the 2 of them must have held back their hatred and didn't dare to cause trouble openly. They could only do bad things secretly. Now that 1,000 years have passed, they can no longer hold back and have started to fight for the throne, right? Long Yin nodded and said indignantly, "Actually, they have always been unconvinced. They feel that I only became the Dragon Emperor because of the protection and support of my 2 uncles. No matter in the past or in the present, they have always been going against me, trying to consolidate and expand their power. However, when Uncle Tianlong was still around, they could only play tricks in secret. After Uncle Tianlong went missing, they had no scruples and gradually increased their strength. Today, their power has already been established, and they have long been fearless, ready to launch an all-out attack. Ji Tianqing had already expected this outcome, so he was not surprised. No wonder I rushed here from the Heavenly Dragon continent. Along the way, I saw that the various regions were nervously preparing for war. I recall that Lu Wu and the Golden Crow Patriarchs have never been on good terms, and there is a blood feud between them. Could it be that in order to overthrow you, they actually joined hands? Long Yan's expression dimmed, and he nodded, one in the south, one in the north, accumulating power for 800 years, unleashing an all-out attack. It will be in a few days. Indeed, as I expected. Ji Tianqing nodded slightly, knowing that the situation already reached the most serious stage. In that case, I came at the right time. You want to help me? Long Yan's eyes lit up, feeling rather touched in his heart. Of course, this result was also within his expectations and would not be surprised. He understood Long Tian's nature and character. Of course. Ji Tianqing nodded solemnly. Long Yan thought for a while, then shook his head and said, I appreciate your kindness. The current situation is already going to start an all-out war. An additional peak Divine King also doesn't have much impact on the situation. Only with an additional million-strong army can victory be determined. The corners of Ji Tianqing's mouth curled into a hint of a cold smile, and he asked, They're like back then, exhausting all their military strength, wanting to use war to decide the outcome. Yes. Long Yan also revealed a hint of a mocking smile, and said, Back then, they were suppressed by the two uncles, unable to use war, and could only have a fair duel, which resulted in a crushing defeat. Now that they have suffered a loss once, how can they repeat the same mistake? Although I have already negotiated with them many times, and even gave them an ultimatum yesterday, wanting to resolve the matter through negotiation, they have already made up their minds. Even if there are millions of corpses and rivers of blood, they have to kill their way into the divine fire cave and seize the throne. Ji Tianqing continued, In order to seize the throne, they can disregard the lives of the common people. Even if the whole continent is in chaos, they will not hesitate. But you, the Red Dragon Emperor, have to worry about the lives of the common people and cannot let the Red Dragon continent be in chaos. So, when they launch an attack from the north and south, you are in a very passive situation. Exactly. Long Yan nodded and sighed with grief and indignation. They're also aware of this point. That's why they can be so unscrupulous. They even use the common people to threaten me many times, forcing me to give in again and again. 3 days ago, in the Battle of Heaven's Pass in the Green Mountain region, when the two armies were facing each other, the Golden Crow clan subordinates actually captured millions of common people and forced the General of Heaven's Pass to retreat. Otherwise, they would have slaughtered millions of common people in front of the battle. Such vicious methods, simply inhumane. Ji Tianqing furrowed his brows, and a ghastly killing intent flashed across his eyes. They are so deranged. Aren't they afraid that their subordinates will be disgusted and rebel? They have committed so many heinous crimes. Even if they can seize the throne, how can they win the hearts of the people? Speaking of this problem, Long Yan could only smile bitterly again. The Golden Crow clan's leader has painstakingly operated for 800 years, and the 30 regions in the south have all become his territory, and those soldiers are all loyal to him. From their point of view, the territories outside the 30 regions, including the common people, are all enemies. They use the lives of their enemies as threats and invade the cities, and have always been successful. That is not a shameful thing, but a wise move. Ji Tianqing's anger grew, and he shouted coldly, only distinguishing between friend and foe, only caring about benefits and victory, and not caring about the lives of the common people. Those bastards have been brainwashed to this extent. Long Yan nodded and sighed. That is why it is said that it is not easy to conquer the world, and even harder to defend the world. Millions of common people have become captives, crying and begging for mercy in front of the battle. What can I do? If I don't care about the lives of those common people, won't I be as shameless as Golden Crow and Lu Wu? At that time, Golden Crow and Lu Wu will definitely take the opportunity to spread rumors and wantonly slander me. They can be shameless, they can be heartless, but I can't be like that. Ji Tianxing was somewhat helpless and nodded. So, you can only have the soldiers retreat and let the enemy easily break through Heaven's Pass? Long Yin was silent, but the answer was obvious because he had no other choice. Ji Tianxing asked again, once or twice is fine, but are you going to keep retreating like this? Golden Crow and Lu Wu are too shameless. They go around capturing common people as captives. Wouldn't it be easy for them to kill their way into divine Fire Grotto heaven? Chapter 3879. Although I care about my reputation and don't want the common people to suffer the calamity of war, I'm not so pedantic. Long Yin did not conceal Ji Tianxing's concerns, nor did he pretend to speak his truest thoughts. In front of Ji Tianxing, he did not need to pretend, nor did he need to pretend to be benevolent. Praises like benevolence and love for the common people had always come from the common people, not from one's own claims. In this aspect, the Crimson Dragon Emperor was very different from Dark North. After a few moments of silence, the Crimson Dragon Emperor continued, "The common people are the weakest and most helpless. They are very ignorant and do not understand the truth of the matter, nor can they see through the schemes of the ambitious. They are easily instigated and brainwashed, deceived, and led by those in power. Thus, Golden Crow and Lu Wu have used various methods over the past several hundred years to successfully fool 60% of the common people and countless soldiers. However, the common people are the most simple, kindest, and also the most innocent. No matter who becomes the Dragon Emperor or who fights for the throne, what does it have to do with them? As long as someone can protect them and give them peace and tranquility, they will wholeheartedly trust you, support you, and even sacrifice everything for you. I sympathize with them, pity them, and do not want the war to affect them. But at this point, if I continue to back down, the entire Crimson Dragon continent will fall. At that time, I will be killed by Golden Crow and Lu Wu, and they will continue to fight for the throne. And once they do, the flames of war will cover the entire continent. Millions of common people will suffer, and who knows how many will be buried with them. At this point, the Crimson Dragon Emperor's eyes and expression became resolute and fierce. Thus, the 36 central regions are my bottom line. Once Golden Crow and Lu Wu's vanguard army reaches the 36 regions, my soldiers will not back down a single step. Ji Tianxing nodded in agreement. This is good. I was worried that you would be too benevolent and allow Golden Crow and Lu Wu to succeed. Right? The war is imminent. Do you have any plans? Long Yin said with a solemn expression. Golden Crow and Lu Wu have sent a large number of experts to infiltrate the 36 domains to capture ordinary people. In the future, they will be used as captives and blackmail on the battlefield. It was unrealistic to ask the people to evacuate or hide. I've already sent countless soldiers to the various regions to take precautions and do their best to protect the people. At the same time, I'm searching for the experts they've sent. However, the 36 domains are too vast, and I don't have enough manpower. I'm afraid it'll be difficult to see any results. Left with no other choice, I could only order my soldiers to spread the word and inform all the realms, empires, and divine kingdoms of the other party's scheme. Fortunately, the people of the various countries express their understanding and support my orders and actions. Even when the two armies go to war and they threaten us with the common people, we will not give in. Ji Tianxing expressed his approval of his arrangements, then asked, at present, only 36 domains are truly under your control. The other 60-some domains are under the control of the Golden Crow and Lu Wu. If the two sides were to engage in a final battle, what are your chances of winning? Long Yin was silent for a moment. He frowned and asked, "Do you want to hear the truth?" 40%. Long Yan's tone was very calm. Clearly, he had already analyzed and predicted this result. Ji Tianxing shook his head and said, 40% is too low. If we can still stall for time, then stall for as long as possible. Unless it's absolutely necessary, don't use war to decide the outcome. But the decision is not in my hands. Long Yin sighed somewhat helplessly. I've already given them an ultimatum. I estimate that there will be a result very soon. The general situation has already been set, and they can't back down. They definitely won't change their minds. Speaking of which, it was quite a coincidence. The two had just finished discussing this topic when a guard loudly reported from outside the study. Reporting to Your Majesty Dragon Emperor, the two patriarchs of the Golden Crow and Lu Wu have just replied to your message. Hearing this voice, Long Yin waved his hand and sent out a flame, opening the door to the study. The messenger guard standing outside the door hurriedly bowed and entered the study, then presented two communication jade slips to Long Yin. Your Majesty Dragon Emperor, please take a look. You may leave. Long Yin took the two jade slips and waved his hand to dismiss the messenger guard. He held a jade slip in one hand and asked Ji Tianxing with a smile, "Do you want to guess the answer?" Ji Tianxing rolled his eyes. "Since you already know the result, what's the point of guessing?" "That's true." Long Yin smiled and released his divine sense into the jade slip to read its contents. A moment later, he crushed the jade slip with both hands and frowned with a gloomy expression. Although he didn't say a word, his reaction and expression had already revealed the result. Ji Tianxing pondered for a moment, then said with a cold gaze and a heavy tone, "Since they are determined to go to war, the common people are bound to suffer. This is also unavoidable. I'm alone and won't be of much use in this war. I can't change the outcome. Since that's the case, I can only execute the decapitation plan and kill both the Golden Crow and Patriarch Lu Wu. When they are leaderless, the situation will collapse on its own." Long Yin hurriedly waved his hand and dissuaded him. "No, it's too dangerous. Moreover, even if you want to assassinate them, I should be the one doing it." Ji Tianxing explained patiently, "I'm not familiar with the situation in the Crimson Dragon continent, and I don't know the generals and experts under your command. I won't be of much help even if I stay here. You have to stay in the Divine Fire Grotto Heaven and command the leaders and generals of the various regions to control the overall situation. I'm a loner, so I'm most suited to assassinate people. Moreover, the Golden Crow and Lu Wu don't know of my existence. This will be the only way to catch them off guard." Long Yin was speechless. He had to admit that Ji Tianxing's words made sense. Letting Ji Tianxing assassinate the Golden Crow and Lu Wu was indeed the most suitable plan. However, he was still full of worry and apprehension. "Brother, since you could defeat the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor, I believe that you are already a peak divine king and are very powerful. However, the Golden Crow and Lu Wu are peak divine kings who have cultivated for more than 20,000 years. Moreover, they have a large number of divine king experts protecting them. It will be very difficult for you to get close to them silently." Ji Tianxing smiled and said, "You only need to tell me the whereabouts of the Golden Crow and Lu Wu. I have my own ways to get close to them and assassinate them. In terms of strength, the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor is much stronger than them. Didn't I defeat him too?" Seeing that Ji Tianxing was so confident, Long Yin could not persuade him anymore. After hesitating for a moment, he voiced his last doubt. "Brother, Patriarch Lu Wu is in the north, and the Golden Crow is in the south. There's half a continent between them. Even if you have the ability to reach the heavens, you can't assassinate both of them within 2 days. Once one of them is assassinated, the other will quickly receive the news and will be on full alert." Chapter 3880. That's a problem. Ji Tianxing frowned and thought for a while before coming up with an idea. "How about this? You and I attack at the same time and deal with the Golden Crow clan leader and Lu Wu clan leader separately." 1,000 years ago, Long Yin was able to defeat the Golden Crow clan leader and Lu Wu clan leader. Now, dealing with one of them would be a piece of cake. Logically speaking, this should be a more feasible method. After a moment of silence, Long Yin said in a low voice, "Long Tian, I feel that there are some things that I should tell you if possible. I hope that you can only defeat them and not kill them. The Dragon Realm today is already very weak. The few peak divine kings cannot fall anymore." Hearing the hidden meaning in his words, Ji Tianxing asked doubtfully, "Do you know some secret? Is there some danger in the Dragon Realm?" Long Yin nodded. There are indeed some secrets that ordinary people do not know. However, the Dragon Realm is not dangerous for now. It can only be considered a crisis. What do you mean? Ji Tianxing vaguely guessed something and was looking forward to it. This is a long story. Let me explain it to you slowly. Long Yin poured him a cup of tea and patiently explained. Currently, on the Crimson Dragon continent, the Golden Crow clan and the Lu Wu clan are the biggest threats to me. The Golden Crow clan occupies a grotto heaven and has more than 4,000 people. They have countless subordinate forces and control more than 20 regions in the south. They can gather 7,000 to 8,000 Sir Gods and have more than 100 divine kings under them. The Lu Wu clan in the north is even stronger than the Golden Crow clan. The Lu Wu clan also occupies a grotto heaven and has more than 10,000 people. They have even more subordinate forces and domain masters. They control more than 30 regions in the north. Under the Golden Crow clan leader, there are nearly 10,000 Sir Gods and more than 150 divine kings. If we really compare, our forces are not as strong as the Lu Wu clan leader. The number and strength of our Dragon clan is actually less than the Lu Wu clan. Isn't it laughable? Do you know why they are both part of the 7 aristocratic families, but the difference in power is so great? Ji Tianxing answered without hesitation. Because the Golden Crow race is a sinful race, but the Lu Wu race isn't. Long Yin looked at him in surprise. You already know? I understand. Ophiuchus told you, right? Ji Tianxing nodded. Ophiuchus told me this secret before. Ever since ancient times, the entire Dragon Realm has been punished by the heavens, causing no one to surpass the Divine King realm in the past 30,000 years. Many other races were punished by the heavens and became sinners. The bloodline of the sinners would continue to wither, and their numbers would gradually decrease until they were completely wiped out. For example, the Dragon Clan, the Phoenix Clan, the Qilin Clan, the Cheonchi Clan, the Taotai Clan, and the Golden Crow Clan are all sinners. Long Yin nodded and said, "What you said is right. This is also the reason why our Dragon Clan is constantly withering and becoming weaker and weaker. The Lu Wu race was not a sinful race, so they were not affected, and their descendants continued to reproduce normally. However, they could not break through the shackles and surpass the Divine King realm. The existence of the heavens' punishment and shackles was known by more and more peak divine kings. Therefore, everyone left the Dragon Realm and went to the outer space to cultivate. In the past few hundred years, Ophiuchus had been active in the outer space. I also left the Dragon Realm and went to the 9 great star fields to search for clues and opportunities to surpass the Divine King realm. Until a few decades ago, when the Golden Crow and Lu Wu race pressed on, the situation of the continent became dangerous, and I rushed back to take charge." Ji Tianxing asked, "My master's disappearance back then, was it related to these secrets?" "It should be." Long Yin nodded and explained, "When Uncle Tianlong left the Dragon Realm, he said that he was going to atone for his sins. At that time, we could not understand. Uncle Tianlong was a person of virtue and prestige, and had always been the kindest and most respected elder. He did not commit any unforgivable sins, so how could he atone for his sins? In our confusion, Ophiuchus, Uncle Black Dragon, and I began to investigate to find out the reason. From then on, we learned about the heavens' punishment and the sinners. At first, we thought that Uncle Tianlong had been a peak divine king for too long, and there was no hope for him to break through. Perhaps he left the Dragon Realm to go to the outer space to find a chance to break through. But later, Uncle Tianlong's soul lamp went out, and we learned that he had fallen. Ophiuchus, Uncle Black Dragon, and I all panicked. Only then did we realize that Uncle Tianlong's atonement probably had a deeper meaning. Therefore, the 3 of us left the Dragon Realm and went to the outer space to investigate and find the truth. After several hundred years of searching and investigating, we did learn many secrets and found many clues." Ji Tianxing's heart skipped a beat as well. He couldn't help but ask, "Then, have you investigated whether my master has fallen or not? If he had fallen, how did he fall? Did he encounter some danger in the outer space? Or was he besieged by strong enemies and died?" Also, did you find his remains and belongings? Long Yin shook his head regretfully. Uncle Tian Long should have fallen, but we don't know why he fell. As for his belongings and remains, we haven't found them yet. 1,000 years have passed, and Uncle Tian Long's fall has become a mystery that still can't be solved. Ji Tianxing frowned and thought for a moment, then asked doubtfully, "But what does this have to do with the Dragon Realm's crisis? Why can't we kill Jin Wu and Patriarch Lu Wu?" "Oh, this matter is related to the God Realm." Long Yin realized that he had gone off topic and hurriedly suppressed the heaviness and sadness in his heart, and explained, "When I was moving in the outer space, I met a divine king of the God Realm." "A divine king of the God Realm?" Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows, guessing that the Dragon Realm's crisis Long Yin mentioned was most likely related to the God Realm. "I came back from the God Realm. As far as I know, there are 5 peak divine kings in the God Realm who broke through the shackles a long time ago and reached the God Emperor Realm." "God Emperor Realm?" Long Yan's eyes flashed with light and said with surprise, "So, above the Divine King Realm is the God Emperor Realm? What kind of realm is that?" Ji Tianxing shook his head and said expressionlessly, "I haven't seen it with my own eyes, so I don't know the details." Long Yan didn't ask any more questions and continued to explain, "I met many divine kings from the God Realm. They developed their forces in various major star fields, seized one world after another, and crazily plundered resources. They used various methods to enslave the natives of those worlds, forcing them to dig and gather cultivation resources for them. At that time, I found it strange. The God Realm's cultivation resources are abundant. So why would they go through so much trouble to plunder the resources of various star fields? So I tried to get close to them and secretly investigated for many years. In the end, I discovered a very shocking secret." "What secret?" Since it was related to the God Realm, Ji Tianxing became more and more interested. Long Yin lowered his voice and said in a low voice, "Those divine kings were working for the stronger ones, and the resources they plundered had to be handed over to their leader." End of chapter. Chapter 3881. At that time, I felt that something was amiss. Those god kings who were crazily plundering resources were basically god kings of the 8th and 9th stage. There were even a few peak god kings. To be able to make them obey and serve so willingly, could it be that the expert of the God Realm had already surpassed the God King realm? Long Yin held the teacup in his hand and said with a solemn expression, "You also know that our dragon realm has been punished by the heavens. No one can surpass the God King realm. Me, Snake Man, Uncle Black Dragon, and the others went to the outer space to look for opportunities to break through. Since I knew that the expert of the God realm had most likely reached an even higher realm, of course I had to continue tracking. So, I spent a few decades and took a huge risk to track down the truth. I saw the strongest experts of the God realm, which are the God emperors you mentioned just now." "What truth?" Ji Tianxing also became nervous when it involved the 5 God emperors. Long Yin frowned and said with a solemn tone, "It was a place even further away than the 9 great star regions, in the deepest part of the void. I saw a huge cloud of gray fog, like a super huge star, floating in the void. Countless God King realm experts drove divine ships, carrying a huge amount of cultivation resources, and rushed to the gray fog star. They were like ants in an endless stream, constantly moving the cultivation resources, as if they didn't know what fatigue was. They were very busy. I tried my best to sneak into a batch of resources and got close to the gray fog star." Long Yan's face was full of reminiscence as he recounted his experience. His eyes were solemn, and his tone was low. Ji Tianxing was also engrossed in the story, and he was worried for Long Yan. At the same time, he was also very anxious to know what was going on with the gray fog star and the 5 God emperors. Long Yin picked up his teacup and took a sip of tea before continuing. "When we were very close to the star, I saw a few pillars of light in the void around the star. Each light pillar was a huge array, formed by thousands of experts. The person who was in charge of the formation was the strongest expert who had surpassed the Divine King realm. Their auras were extremely powerful, just like the power of the heavenly Tao, making it impossible for me to get close. The cultivation resources that were transported from all directions were poured into the large arrays, causing the light pillars to become even more brilliant and dazzling. Originally, I wanted to sneak into the vicinity of one of the formations and secretly observe the situation. But I didn't expect that the God Emperor would discover me before I could even get close to the formation. That God Emperor was a woman who was tens of thousands of meters tall. Her entire body was shining with golden light. I didn't have time to see her appearance clearly before I heard her shout. Many guards and Divine King powerhouses rushed towards my hiding place. Although I have the strength of a peak Divine King, there are many of them. There are many high Divine Kings among them. Once I'm trapped by them, I'll definitely die. Therefore, I could only run as fast as I could to get away from that foggy star. They chased me for 3 whole years before I managed to shake them off. At this point, Long Yin had finished narrating his experience. Ji Tianxing was still unsatisfied. He asked anxiously, "That female God Emperor, was she wearing white clothes, had an extremely beautiful face, and an elegant temperament? Was there a red mole between her eyebrows?" He knew clearly that among the 5 great God Emperors, there was only one female, and that was Pan Ruo. Even if Pan Ruo had broken through to the God Emperor realm, her appearance shouldn't have changed too much. But unfortunately, Long Yin shook his head, revealing a bitter smile. At that time, I was still very far away from her, at least 100,000 kilometers away, but I was discovered by her. She was tens of thousands of meters tall, and her entire body was shining with golden light. Divine power lingered around her. How could I see her clearly? After a moment of silence, he suddenly thought of something. He turned to look at Ji Tianxing. "Could it be that you know her?" Of course I know her." Ji Tianxing's lips curled into a cold smile. "She is called Pan Ruo, the overlord of the primal chaos continent. The other 4 great God Emperors are Azura, Lu Jiuyang, Dao Xingyun, and Yuming. The 5 of them controlled the 5 continents of the God realm. But after they surpassed the God King realm, they seemed to look down on the God realm. For close to 1,000 years, they didn't seem to be in the God realm. They were always active in the outer space. In the past, I didn't know what they were doing in the outer space. But now the truth is out." Hearing him speak in such detail, a series of conjectures appeared in Long Yan's mind. His eyes lit up as he said, "That's right. In the past 1,000 years, you have always been cultivating in the God realm. You are also a peak God King. You must know those 5 great God Emperors. From your tone, it seems like you have some enmity with them?" Ji Tianxing only nodded and didn't say anything else. Regarding his fall in his previous life and his reincarnation, the fewer people who knew, the better. Even if Long Yan was as close as a brother to him, he couldn't easily reveal it. Long Yan's expression was somewhat indignant. His eyes dimmed as he smiled bitterly. "Although I don't know what you experienced in the God realm, your enemy is my enemy. It's just that they have already surpassed the God King realm and reached the unfathomable God Emperor realm. Even if we want to take revenge, we are not their match. Brother, I advise you to bear with it a little." "I know." Ji Tianxing nodded to show that he understood. Actually, to the 5 great God Emperors, the current God realm is just a treasure land and mine for plundering resources. They are not in the God realm, and their loyal lackeys are also desperately plundering resources. Previously, I was still puzzled. What are they planning to do by plundering so many resources? Now it seems that they're crazily plundering the resources of the God realm and the 9 major star fields for that foggy star. Yes. Long Yin nodded. So, after investigating that matter, I began to worry about the Dragon Realm. I am worried that the 5 great God Emperors plundering the resources of the God Realm and the 9 major star fields is not enough, and will eventually reach out to the Dragon Realm. Right now, the Dragon Realm has few talents, and there is not a single God Emperor. If the 5 great God Emperors come to invade, how can we resist? Ji Tianxing finally understood his worries and apprehensions. Peak God King experts often need thousands or tens of thousands of years to cultivate one. Right now, the dragon realm only has a dozen or so peak god kings, and one dead is one less. So, even if the Golden Crow clan chief and Lu Wu clan chief wanted to kill you and snatch your dragon emperor position, you are unwilling to kill them? Long Ian didn't speak, and nodded to show that he admitted it. Ji Tianqing smiled and patted him on the shoulder. You're quite enlightened, aren't you? The Golden Crow and Lu Wu, those two idiots, only care about your dragon emperor position. And you have already set your sights on the entire dragon realm, the god realm, and the starry skies. Compared to you, those two idiots are simply frogs at the bottom of a well. Long Yin only smiled at Ji Tianqing's praise and didn't feel proud at all. Both of them were silent. After a moment, Ji Tianqing still couldn't help but ask, what exactly is that foggy star you saw?